Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 760 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And Russia is having another bad day. 2 ships down the toilet. And it's good to see you all once again on the best night of the week, the fundraising night. Yeah!
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine and everything that has happened in between then. 2 Russian warships have been heavily destroyed. There's a bit of a typo. They have not been sank. They've just been heavily damaged. We've also been able to hear that 3 Russian aircraft have been destroyed at Belbek Airfield by a decisive Ukrainian strike. Not only that, but the Russians are planning on building a massive railroad from Rostov-on-Don into Crimea. And on top of that all, we are hearing that apparently the gunmen inside the Russian Federation have been captured, and already they are showing that they're torturing those specific people. We'll be covering that a little bit. We won't be able to show much about that because of YouTube's rules and guidelines, and we will also be talking about what appears to be some kind of an attempt of a fear tactic that was attempted in St. Petersburg today. We are also going to be talking a little bit about the Polish response and NATO's response to the violation of the airspace that happened just a few hours, well, not that long ago, about a day ago nearly, over Polish airspace near the Polish-Ukrainian border. A lot has gone on. There is so much that has gone on. It's hard for me to even try and recap all of it, as DCC Prime throws in a $250 donation to the fundraiser.
Let's go. I'm telling you what, up to 1,100 already. Impressive.
And you know something, y'all, that actually reminds me, DCC Prime, thank you so much for throwing that in, because that actually reminds me that tonight is a very special night. Every single Sunday on this channel, I know that we have many new people here because we're already at unbelievable numbers. We're nearly at 5,000 live viewers, and we've only been talking for about 2 minutes. But tonight's fundraiser is for Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. Every single weekend, on every single Sunday, except for 1 weekend since the beginning of the war, this channel has run a fundraiser through YouTube Give in support of a nonprofit that's been operating in Ukraine. And tonight's is Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. They are an amazing nonprofit organization that has been operating out of the Bucha Hospital European area for quite some while, and they help out with rehabilitating and saving the lives of Ukrainian soldiers who have nearly given their own lives inside of the war in Ukraine. Their support and their help to these soldiers is massive, and every bit of support that this channel is able to fundraise to help out Revive Soldiers of Ukraine helps them once more to try and go forward and save more Ukrainian soldiers' lives and get them back onto the path of recovery. But with that, we're now going to be moving on into our breaking news of the night, which is that a major attack occurred on Sevastopol, and now the damage is becoming incredibly clear and quite easy for everyone to see. Moving us into our first little bit of news, we got to see some of the clips of the explosions that were occurring not too long ago. And I'll be showing you all these here. These were some that weren't necessarily talked about yesterday, and it appears that these actually happened a little bit after the explosions that we covered on the news yesterday, maybe even a little bit after our stream ended. But here are the explosions that continued to occur in Sevastopol over the course of the night. Nice. I like it. Oh, very nice. Oh, very nice.
These are all Storm Shadow missiles, right?
All of them were Storm Shadows. Yes, that is correct.
Those have a really, satisfying, thunderclap behind them when they explode.
They really do. It's a nice whole explosion. I would say that it's a whole of explosion approach. Oh.
Damn.
And it looks like air defense attempted to intercept one of them. Now, what's particularly important to note is that the explosions that we saw over here on the left side, we believe those to be the ones that hit the Black Sea Fleet's communication relays and systems, and really their communication headquarters over on the left side of the screen. Here on the right side of the screen, where these explosions are continuing, that is believed to be 2 Rapucha-class landing ships, the Azov, and I believe another one that was called the Terep or something like that, and we'll make sure to get the name correct here in just a second. But moving on from that, we were able to see, I'm sorry, it's the Yampol. The Yampol is a very weird name, and for some reason I cannot remember it to save my life. But we were able to see that the Azov and the Yampol were pictured in port just yesterday before this attack occurred, and it was showing that both of them were in the area. The best I could find is that they were right here in the Korobilnya Busta, or Buska. That's the best way I can pronounce it. But we can actually see that apparently the Azov, which we believe is on the left side of the screen, is actually right here on the satellite images as well. It's one of the Rapucha-class landing ships, and we can see it right there. It appears that the Yampel was right where the small floating barge was, or where these yachts are being repaired at the moment, moored right over here. And we can see the Yampel right there. Now, moving on from that and into the next bit of news we got an announcement by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense that both Russian ships, these fairly large and fairly sizable warships, have been completely destroyed. And we're going to be making sure to read the English translation here. Shocked is what this says, but I believe this actually says something along the lines of destroyed in Ukrainian. And let me make sure English to Ukrainian, and let me type this in, because I want to make sure destroyed. That is not what Google Translate is showing. Let me see if it shows shocked instead. And that is not the word that's showing up for shocked either in Google Translate, but nevertheless, the English translation that we have here says shocked. The defense forces of Ukraine successfully hit the large amphibious ships Yampel and Azov, the communications center, as well as several infrastructure facilities of the Russian Federation in the temporarily occupied Sevastopol, Slava Ukraini. Then, moving on from that and into the Ukrainian translation, we can see some light clips showing what appears to be damage and also showing the Azov and the Yampel right here. Both of them, once again, being Rapucha-class landing ships. We've seen these a million times because a million of these have been destroyed in the war and have ended up going to the bottom of the sea. Unfortunately, while the initial information that was coming out was saying that the ships had been completely destroyed in the blast and had sunk at their moorings, it appears that unfortunately that was not the case. However, good news did come out. It does appear that both of them have clear signs of heavy damage that have been caused, and we are seeing that there's apparently some sort of efforts to try and keep the ships afloat or to try and move them immediately into dry docks so that way they do not begin to sink where their moorings were at. We were able to see the Yampel and the Azov once again in this satellite picture taken just today, but interestingly, note this. One, right here, we can see a large fleet of tugboats that have been moving a lot around this particular Rapucha-class landing ship. We're not really sure if this is the Azov or the Yampel, but we can also see something very interesting. They're moving around the Azov. It appears that they're trying to move it around, maybe to a little bit to the left when the satellite picture was being taken, or maybe even to the right, actually, because it looks like this tug up here is pulling, this one's pulling a little bit farther back, and this one is going straight south. So it looks like they're actually trying to rotate the bow a little bit further to the right in this picture. But what's very interesting about that is that there is a floating dry dock directly in front of this Rapucha-class landing ship in the satellite picture that has been fully submerged, so that way they can slide this Rapucha-class landing ship into it immediately, showing that this ship has most likely suffered some kind of serious damage. It doesn't appear that a fire has ravaged the ship, but apparently there must be some sort of a breach or some kind of damage for them to have to pull it into a floating dry dock to immediately begin repairs. We can also see over here on the right side of the screen, in this red square right here, we can also see another Rapucha-class landing ship. We're not sure once again which one is the Azov or the Yampel in this picture, but we can see some kind of a black smudge mark near to the side of the ship. And we are believing that that may possibly be an impact site on the side of the ship that has ended up causing damage, but did not lead to the ship taking on water, and its condition may be less so serious. This one appears to be in serious condition, and they are immediately rushing it into a dry dock. This one appears that it has had light to moderate damage, and it is still seaworthy, I guess you could say, at least in this mooring, and they're going to keep it here until they can find a dry dock and a tug fleet to then drag it into a floating dry dock and then put it in one as well. But one thing has become very clear is that these ships are apparently going to be out of action for a while, especially the one being moved into the floating dry dock right now. That one will probably be out of action for at least a month, maybe several months at that, as they try and effect repairs to the vessel. We also know that this landing ship over here most likely will not be out of service for that long. It'll probably be out of service for maybe 2.5 to 3 weeks at best once they effect repairs, and then it'll be underway at sea again if they even use it, or it may stay moored in Sevastopol, or once both of them are repaired, they may immediately begin a race to Novorossiysk so that way they can be out of range of the next incoming Ukrainian drone attack, so that way the already damaged ships don't become further damaged and end up sinking to the bottom of the port of Sevastopol once and for all. Also, I've seen some people talking about it appears that some of the ships have a list. I'm not really sure which one people are saying has a list. I can't really tell right here. But it does look like, out of the both of them, I can't really see a list in my opinion. I'm trying to look really hard to see what y'all are seeing, and sadly, I'm just not seeing a list on either of these at the moment. I'm assuming that this one probably is taking on water to some kind of a degree, or at least one of its watertight compartments has been completely filled with water, because they are rapidly moving it into a dry dock. You don't do that right after an attack for no reason. The condition of the ship has to be critical, but still salvageable for them to try and attempt that. But moving on from that satellite pictures and clips, we didn't get to see that they were completely destroyed, but they are definitely out of action here for the foreseeable future. We were also able to see the damage that was caused. We finally got a picture of the communications headquarters that was hit last night, and the damage was serious. We can see that there was a nice hole created in the roof, and we were also able to get additional pictures today that I did not include into this news summary tonight, showing that the building is completely burned out. Here's one right here. There were also about 5 others that I did not include, but it does show that the building has completely burned out. And also, Matthew, it appears that the wall is bowing out right there where one of the storm shadows exploded. Like, the wall has literally curved outwards.
Oh, yeah, it sure does. And this was the communications center, wasn't it?
It was the communications headquarters, and if we can find it, it was right down here, and I believe it was this building in, yeah, I think it was actually that building in particular. Yeah.
So you know, now that they can't communicate with one another, they can no longer tell each other, two group, team up, two group, it'll save you. It's not going to save them anymore, man.
Dude, the Black Sea Fleet saw the Azov and the Yample get hit out there in the harbor, and they got on that radio and they said, two group, and they got blown up as well. I guess you could call it two group, but beyond that, very nice to see that the Ukrainian attack on Sevastopol port was very successful and ended up producing a decent amount of damage, a good bit of damage that the Russian Navy will probably be reeling from again. It's not the first time they've been reeling in the war, but they are certainly going to continue to be reeling. And we can also see that the communications center is not even up and operational to get that news back to Moscow at the moment. The Navy probably had to go through Army communication networks to be able to try and get that information back to Moscow and tell them that things had gone badly overnight and several ships are damaged and the communications headquarters has been completely destroyed. Not only that, but there is some really big news coming from Belbek Airfield, just north of the city of Sevastopol. And I gotta say, by the way, just a really quick side note, thank you to everyone who is supporting the fundraiser. I just saw the support come flowing in like a wave. I guess we are already up to $1.6 thousand in the fundraiser. Tonight's goal is $3,000. Not trying to push it or anything, but the Lee Spring Army has never missed a goal in the history of this channel. And I know that we're going to hit 3,000 and go even beyond that, thanks to people like Say What, who threw in a $100 donation to the fundraiser. But
super nice. 1.7 thousand raised in total. I love to see it.
very nice. But moving on up into the area of Belbek Airfield. Belbek Airfield is one of the most heavily used airfields just outside Sevastopol by the Russian Air Force. We can see right here a decent amount of what appears to be possibly Su-35s. They are Su-35s. And I believe at the moment there is also an Su-34 fighter bomber wing that is based out of Belbek Airfield. We can also see a whole bunch of older MiG-29 trainer aircraft. It seems to be that some of them have tandem cockpits, but it doesn't look like anyone's using those because they rolled those onto the grass and they're just sitting there, kind of chilling a little. But beyond that, there is an Su-34 fighter bomber wing and also a Su-35 fighter wing based out of the Belbek Airfield near Sevastopol City. From what we were able to hear, the Ukrainians have gotten information. We sadly have not been able to get picture and video evidence to completely confirm this information, so I have to tell y'all, this is largely confirmed because we take Ukrainian reports mostly at face value, but we will be waiting for further picture and video evidence to back up this claim. But they said that 3 Russian jets have been destroyed at Belbek Airfield, all 3 of them being Su-27s. Funnily enough, this is actually a picture from Belbek Airfield of an Su-27 fighter wing that was based there, and we can see that these are fairly nice looking. I have to say that the Su-27 is probably one of the better looking 4th generation fighters out there in the world, and it seems as though the Russians are going to be short about 3 of them after last night. I guess they won't really have to be finding any additional parts for these aircraft, and we were also told that around 30 Russian soldiers had been killed in Crimea over all of the attacks that occurred last night on the Azov, the Yample, on the communications headquarters, and on the airfield. overall, I gotta be honest with y'all, that is a fairly low casualty rate for as many targets that were stricken, considering that 2 landing ships were hit, a communications headquarters was also hit, and an airfield was hit. It seems kind of low to say only 30 Russian soldiers were killed, so we have really no reason to doubt that that number is inaccurate, because realistically it's actually quite low. A normal Rapucha-class landing ship has a crew of at least 150 people on board, even more than that at different times. The communications headquarters is always staffed and operated 24 hours a day, hence it being a communications headquarters. Communications in the middle of a war has to happen at all hours of the day. And then on top of that, the airfield, with the Su-27s out on the tarmac, may have had some ground crews skittering around out there, maybe doing some stuff in the dead of night for these aircraft to be operational for the next day. With all that in mind, considering that only 30 Russians have been confirmed killed, that's actually a very, very low estimate. And once again, 100% accurate. It may even be inaccurate due to underreporting the number. But moving on out of the area of the Belbek airfield, the attack on Sevastopol has been a massive one and very devastating for the Russian Air Force and the Russian Navy once more. Russian naval vessels have been put out of action again, another 2 of them, and now that they are pretty hard pressed for dry docks or floating dry docks inside of Sevastopol, we can assume that further damage that's caused to the Black Sea Fleet, whatever is left of it inside Sevastopol, is going to just start building up pretty much in a queue to wait to try and get into one of the floating dry docks or one of the actual usable dry docks like this one right here, so that way they can repair them. And once they're repaired, they're probably going to start sending them off down to Novorossiysk, where they'll wait out the rest of the war, and the Russians will be praying that none of them will get attacked again and sink. Although that's a really high wish for the Russians, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think, honestly, it's only a matter of time before we see the Ukrainians shift their attacks from the area of Sevastopol all the way down to Novorossiysk entirely. It's not that far away, especially when you put it as the crow flies. Like, for example, if we go to Zaporizhia and we send the marker all the way down to Novorossiysk, that is only 231 miles that a drone would have to fly to be able to try and conduct an attack on Novorossiysk. We already seen just yesterday that a drone flew nearly 580 miles to the town of Samara, really the town of Novokubitskivsk, if I said that correct, and hit the oil refinery there. So it's not out of the question that they could launch a mid-range attack like this and end up attacking the Russian fleet down there. So in reality, they're not really safe anywhere. But, for the most part, the Russians want to think that they'll be a little bit safer in Novorossiysk, and we believe that they're probably going to be acting off of that belief here in the near future. One thing's for certain, though. The Russians are leading a lot of NATO countries, especially Poland, to believe that there is nothing safe about this war, and the war is almost coming to Poland. At least that's what the Polish government is thinking at the moment, because last night while we were live on air, several Russian missiles ended up flying over the Polish-Ukrainian border for a short while and turned inwards and back onto their targets, pretty much flying in from Polish territory. There has been a pretty big deal with that. But before we get to that, I have to make sure that we address something that talks about the naval side of things, because I'm so quick trying to get to the next bit of news, I completely forgot to talk about this, because the moving of Russian naval ships from the Sevastopol port area down into the area of Novorossiysk is something that has been happening for quite a while. We've seen that the entirety of the submarine fleet has been moved from Sevastopol directly to Novorossiysk right after the Rostov-on-Don Kilo-class submarine was hit and destroyed inside of one of the dry docks inside of the port of Sevastopol. And specifically, it was actually destroyed in this dry dock right here on the right side. You can actually see one of the Kilo-class submarines right here in this satellite picture undergoing a refit. It's actually reversed. That Kilo-class submarine was in this dry dock on the right side, and the Rapucha-class landing ship, the Minsk, I believe it was over here on the left side and ended up getting hit and burned to the ground inside of the dry dock, and the Kilo-class submarine followed suit directly alongside.
You know, something I just realized is Russia calls their submarine the Kilo class. That's probably the exact same thing the cartel calls their subs as well. The narco subs, probably Kilo class. It's probably the same thing, man. I just realized that.
Man, they probably do. Dude, you know, when the cartel hears of the Kilo-class submarine, they're like absolutely salivating, thinking, man, if we could get our hands on one of these bad boys, like imagine the kind of cocaine we could get in America. I mean, dude, I'm telling you what, man, if the cartel actually named one of their submarines a Kilo-class narco sub, I would actually be rolling on the floor. And dude, the Russians would probably be pissed. Like, they'd be like, they're making fun of our glorious submarine. But in reality, the Kilo-class submarine probably is the closest thing in the modern world to a narco sub. I'll explain why. So here's what it actually looks like when it's underway at sea. These things are actually fairly small. Like compared to an American submarine, they're really, really small. And I'll give you all the actual length and displacement. So the thing is only 229 to 242 feet long, depending on which kilo class it is, and it is only displacing around. Let me make sure. It's only displacing around 23,525 tons. So that's really nothing. I mean, this is a tiny little yacht, pretty much, of a submarine. To give you all a comparison, let me just type in the Virginia class submarines of the United States. And let me make sure to scroll down here. So, to give you all an idea of how small a kilo class submarine is, here is the USS Virginia. We have 22 of these things active right now, all around the world. And this thing displaces a nice, cool, depending on the block variant, block 1 through 4 is around 8,000 tons of displacement, and the block 5 is around 10,200. Compared to the kilo classes, tiny 25 tons. That is almost nothing. This thing is tiny. It is incredibly small, and it really can't do much. And it's also a diesel electric, which is considered fairly archaic these days. A diesel electric actually, more so, well, this is kind of a very, very complex thing to describe, but the Kilo class submarine is a diesel electric. It uses diesel engines, which means that it has to be above the water surface, so it has to be surfaced for it to be able to use its diesel engines. But once it needs to, it shuts off the diesel engines and it runs on electrical power, meaning that the ship is propelled by nothing more than electrical batteries inside the submarine. When it is operating under electrical power, it is a very quiet submarine. It's one of the quieter ones out there in the world. But the thing is that when it's using its diesel engines, it is the loudest submarine out there in the world. So it's either the quietest or the loudest, depending on what form of propulsion it is actually using. And going off of that, that means that these little submarines would not be able to do that well. And I'll describe why. So let's just say they're in the Black Sea and they're going up against the US Navy. So the US Navy has nothing but nuclear-powered submarines. We do not have a diesel-electric in the fleet at the moment. If a USS Virginia was down here in the southern area of the Black Sea and one of these Kilo-class submarines was leaving port, it would leave port using its diesel engines heading out in some direction. It would then shut off its diesel engine, and then it would start working on its electric power, probably. The problem is that the USS Virginia would already know where that Kilo-class submarine is going and just start heading into that general direction, and once it thinks it's close enough, it would start pinging with its active sonar and then fire off a torpedo, and that Kilo-class submarine is practically screwed at that point. There is really no such thing as a stealth submarine. Pretty much all of them do deflect radar signatures, well, more so sonar signatures. Under the water, radar and sonar are different, but all of them reflect sonar signatures, especially the Kilo-class submarine. And so once you kind of know the general direction it's heading in, if you ping it with an active sonar, you are going to find this thing, and you are going to be able to end up killing it, no matter how quiet it is. Kind of the same thing with the Virginia-class, and while a nuclear-powered submarine is not perfectly quiet like an electrical-powered submarine is when it's running off of electrical power, nuclear power is substantially quieter than a diesel-electric overall, and that's why the U.S. Navy fields nothing but nuclear-powered submarines, because they are just that much better at staying undetected, because they're never heard in the first place by underwater microphones or passive sonar, which is literally just pretty much underwater microphones, and so it's a lot harder to be able to figure out where these things are in the first place. I also see Rick B saying they would not use active sonar. You're right, they probably would use passive, but even then, if, for some reason, the Kilo-class submarine switched from diesel to electric, and then you could not hear it to be able to use passive sonar, they probably would try and ping it at least a couple of times with active sonar to fire off a couple of torpedoes, and then hit an evasive and get the hell out of there, or go below the thermal layer, or something like that. But once again, I'm not a submariner. We do have submariners in the chat, and y'all probably know a lot more than me. But nevertheless, this isn't that great of a submarine. But it is the best thing that the Russians have right now in the Black Sea Fleet. And they are probably going to try and be getting these little narco subs, pretty much, compared to what the U.S. Navy has, out of there and onto Novorossiysk, or at least that's kind of what we're thinking because of these attacks. The Russian Black Sea Fleet is under a constant state of attack while it's in Sevastopol, and we have seen that there's been this gradual shift from the port of Sevastopol over to Novorossiysk as the war keeps on going. And we've seen that there has been a decent amount of apparently argument, even, or at least a completely different line of thinking from everyone in the chat, talking about what's going to happen now. Are the Russians going to move as many of their ships as possible out of Sevastopol and Novorossiysk, or are they just kind of screwed? And no matter where they send them, they're going to be under attack and most likely destroyed. And Matthew, what do you think?
All right, and we asked you all in the audience. We said Ukraine destroyed, more like severely damaged, 2 more Russian landing vessels last night. And the question to y'all is, can Russia save their other ships? It looks like 43% said yes, Russia will simply move their ships away from the current port they're in. And 38% said no, Russia is simply out of hiding spots. And 9% said they needed more info. And in my opinion, there are other places for Russia to move these vessels, but I think the key thing is that they're actually having to move their vessels away from the war zone to actually flee these Ukrainian missile strikes. And obviously, that's not something Russia prefers to do. They prefer to keep them right there so they can launch more missile attacks in Ukraine. But now they're going to have to actually take these vessels away to avoid these storm shadows actually striking them and sinking them. And even though these 2 landing vessels apparently weren't destroyed, they are severely knocked out of action. So they're not going to be going back to use tomorrow. It's going to be a good minute. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the Russians are most likely going to continue to move their ships to Novorossiysk. It seems to be the most likely option to me. It does get them a little bit further away from Ukrainian drone attacks, because from what we understand, right now at the moment, at least towards Sevastopol, that's a 154-mile range attack into the area of Novorossiysk from the closest launching point. That means, and let me try and get this, that would be about 220 miles. So you're adding about an extra 70 miles of distance in between them and the Ukrainians. And so they're most likely going to try and move them there just to eke out that extra little bit of distance that those drones would have to fly. So that way, hopefully, Russian air defense would be able to pick them up and shoot them down. But even then, this attack that happened last night was not conducted with drones. They were actually conducted with Storm Shadow missiles, and that's why we believe it was so successful. Going off of that, that means if they move these ships to Novorossiysk, they're completely off the table. The Ukrainians had promised to Western nations like Britain and France that had provided the Storm Shadow missiles that they would never use them on Russian territory, and Novorossiysk is a Russian port inside of the Russian Federation, meaning that the Ukrainians would not be able to use the Storm Shadows on those ships, and that alone may be the selling point to start moving a lot of the Black Sea Fleet into the area of Novorossiysk and just leave them there. I believe that may be why I'm kind of leaning a little bit more towards them moving the ships to Novorossiysk instead of keeping them in Sevastopol, because if anything, it might not lower the amount of drone attacks that's occurring on the fleet, but it will completely cut out the ability of the Storm Shadows to be used against them. And so with that, I hope that addresses that idea fairly well, in my opinion. And also, by the way, not to shout this out, but we are nearly at $2,500 raised on the fundraiser. We are only about $600 away right now from the fundraiser goal. So
close. So close, man. Look how close we are. That quick. And remember, we're only, 30 minutes into the stream, and we're already that close? Like, shoot, I can't do math, but $600 or $700 away or something like that. We're super close.
And so make sure to support the fundraiser, folks, because it does help to save Ukrainian lives, and that's a big part of why we run this channel, is to help out in Ukraine through these Sunday night fundraisers. But moving on from that and into Poland, and getting back to that news I was trying to talk about a little while ago, some Polish F-16s were scrambled last night while we were live on air because Russian cruise missiles ended up flying over the Polish-Ukrainian border in the Polish airspace for a short while and turned back to attack their targets at Lviv. We actually were able to see that apparently some of these missiles successfully hit their targets, and we saw some explosions near to the area of the city of Lviv in this clip right here. We see the explosions in the distance of the incoming missiles. And from what we understand, these are the exact ones that came flying in over the Ukrainian-Polish border back around and onto the western side of Lviv. We believe that the massive fireball may have actually been some kind of an ammunition cache of the Ukrainian armed forces, because it's continuing to burn with a very high brightness, and while it's so dark, we really can't see the kind of smoke coming off the explosion. It does seem to have the kind of duration and brightness that an ammunition dump explosion would have. Nevertheless, the Polish are absolutely pissed today that these missiles flew over their airspace and back into Ukraine. And we've already heard that Polish government officials are demanding for a brand new approach from NATO air defense. According to the head of Poland's National Security Bureau, he said that NATO must change its stance on how it defends the alliance's airspace. And he says that all Russian missiles that fly into NATO airspace must be shot down in the future. And then, of course, Visegrad 24 goes on to talk about how there's been multiple airspace violations in Romania. And not only that, a lot of these drones that violated the Romanian airspace actually ended up colliding and exploding on Romanian-controlled land on the southern side of the Danube River. This is a fairly big deal, especially for the Polish, because what happened technically last night was a complete breach of their sovereignty by Russian missiles. Not only that, weapons of war of the Russian Federation that flew into their airspace and right back out with absolutely no regard to Polish airspace or Polish sovereignty over that airspace. This is something that the Polish are speaking about very angrily, and we've seen that the Romanians have brought this up a little bit before, but not as strongly as the Poles have. This is something that is certainly starting to become a massive ordeal because it appears that Russia, whenever it really needs to, does not care about NATO airspace to any degree. And it's something that we've seen a massive argument being held over today. Some people are once again throwing up the argument that the United States and other NATO allies should not be moving air defense systems into Poland and Romania because while they're a part of our alliance, we don't owe them anything, and we shouldn't help them out at all. Some other people are saying that because it's our alliance that we kind of agreed to be in and we're in with everyone else, we ought to be helping them out and moving air defense into Poland and helping the Poles to shoot down any incoming air targets like these that may show up in the future. Everyone's had many different opinions, and I want to hear what y'all's are in the live chat, but luckily, we've already gotten a pretty good idea of what y'all are thinking. And Matthew, what do you think about that airspace violation that happened last night, and what do you think should happen as a result?
Okay, so on that topic, we asked you all in the audience the question of should NATO respond to the incursion in Polish airspace of those missiles. 70% believes that NATO should deploy at least air defense inside of Poland to shoot them down in the future. Percent said NATO responded with alert status, and 10% said NATO should do the same to Russia. And I'll be honest with you, with the last option there, that was a bit of a sarcastic one. We should launch missiles across the Russian border towns. It's probably not a good idea. I would say definitely, like it's a no-brainer to me, deploy air defense into Poland and make sure they have enough to spread across their entire border because we cannot have those missiles crossing over into NATO airspace. Even if it doesn't cause any damage, it is threatening Poland's sovereignty, and it's also weakening the alliance every time that happens because it pushes our red line back further and further and further until it's basically meaningless. Eventually, Russia's going to be shooting missiles across Germany and everywhere else to hit Ukraine if they want to at this rate. So we got to have a red line somewhere, and I think air defense is a good start to shoot these missiles down. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would certainly have to say that trying to create some form of air defense shield over NATO skies is something that needs to be a priority. The fact that NATO airspace is being violated by Russian missiles, weapons of war for that matter, continuously, we're not really doing anything as a response, I believe is a sign of weakness. If I was the president of the United States, and not that I am, but if y'all vote for me in 2040, way in the future I will be, I would say that some specific U.S. divisions, not brigades, I'm talking about entire divisions, should be moved into Romania and Poland, and their entire job should be the deployment of Patriot air defense and THAAD air defense batteries to attempt to shoot down any Russian missiles that appear to be traveling into NATO airspace or currently violating NATO airspace. These kinds of provocations should be met with the immediate termination of these missiles and shooting them down while they're in NATO airspace. The fact that they are not causing any damage is of no concern. It is a matter of principle that this defensive alliance completely stands for the defense of the nations that are a part of it. The fact that a weapon is able to fly through the airspace of countries that are in our alliance and we're not doing anything at the moment, I consider that to be a complete sign of weakness on our end, and I feel like we should be working much harder to present a stronger and firmer image to the Russians than we currently are at the moment. They should be very clear from our light actions alone, because those Russian shoot downs or NATO shoot downs of Russian missiles would be a fairly light response. They should be very clear just off of those responses alone that if they continue to try and provoke us, things will only get worse for them because we are ready to go and gung-ho to deal with them if the moment ever arises. That would be how I address the situation, because I think that it is completely absurd that the Poles are outraged because the NATO air defense doctrine at the moment is not one that is assertive. It pretty much is one that just sits back and lets anything happen. If they fly a few miles into Poland, what happens if they fly all the way over Warsaw, or all the way over Lublin, or Rejal? What in the world do we do then? Because if it can fly a few miles, then it may as well be flying all the way across Poland, and no one's doing anything to stop them or doing anything about it. Then what? What if the Russians decide, based off of our ineptitude to shoot down Russian missiles, or inaction to do it, what if they decide that they actually can start to conduct preemptive strikes on Baltic countries and Eastern European countries and begin to try a preemptive war because NATO's responses are so slow? And they're certainly not slow to respond in other instances, because the United States Air Force confirmed today that 2 B-1 Lancers were intercepted by a MiG-31 in the Barents Sea and turned around in international airspace. That just came out not that long ago today. That's showing how assertive and aggressive the Russians are, and I believe if they want to be that aggressive and they want to play ball like that, we need to play ball as well. There's no kidding around here. The Russians are a very aggressive country. They're one that needs to be shown aggression in return, because if you give them an inch, they're the kind of country that will take a mile. There should be no compromise. There should be absolutely no circumstances that Russian weapons, Russian missiles, and Russian aircraft fly through our skies. Never. And I hope I was able to address that well, at least in my opinion. But moving on from that and out of the Barents Sea, it's time for us to get on up into Russia, because Russia has been having a lot of things going on today, not just as far as the port attack that has now caused a pretty serious amount of damage. We're also seeing that apparently the whole deal with the extremist attacks is continuing inside of Russia. Moving on up into the area of St. Petersburg, we were able to hear today that apparently there was a bomb threat that was placed on a St. Petersburg mall, which led to a mass amount of people running frantically out of the mall and trying to get away from what was believed to be a very dangerous situation. See everyone getting out of the mall here.
Что случилось? Застегивайся.
Interesting that the mall is called the London Mall. For them to hate the West, they really do like to call everything as Western as possible. Like Crocus City Hall in English. Like, what's up with the Russians hating America and hating the West, but everything they do that's supposed to be really nice and ritzy, it's named after Western stuff.
It's also like they're mocking at the same time, too, as they put, like, the circus lettering over London. It's like, is that really a good thing or a bad thing?
Man, I'm about to turn into slow and be like, we will glass St. Petersburg, but anyways. We hear people freaking out and trying to run. And that's the end of the clip. But moving on from that, we were able to see that apparently, immediately, the guy who called in the bomb threat was found and captured. I'm going to show y'all this clip. I got much to say. Alright, so, this apparently is an Oman, or an Oman, well, Oman is probably the best way to say it, armed police officer. Pretty much the SWAT inside of Russia. He comes walking. Why in the world does Twitter always do that, man? When I pause like a video, it just goes to a black screen. But we can see the guy walking out here with this fella. Interestingly enough, the guy is holding his arms down below him. This guy is holding a Makarov with the finger on the trigger.
And waving it around.
Yeah, and waving it around like it's a toy. And the whole thing seems a little bit odd. I'm going to play it from the very start since Twitter wants to black out the video every time I pause it. So here's the whole clip in its entirety, and then we're going to break it down a little bit more.
Look at that. He's literally directing traffic with a Makarov. Like, you only see that in Russia.
Man, only in Russia. Honestly, man, I'm kind of doubting that is a Makarov, because it's a little too shiny to be a Makarov. Usually Makarovs... Wait a minute. No, that is a Makarov. Yeah, you're right. It is a Makarov. But That's a little bit odd. And also the other thing that's odd is that the guy isn't even handcuffed from what we can tell. And he's not arresting them in the normal Russian way, because there's an actual way, kind of a form that the Russians use when arresting someone, is that they take one of the arms and they hold it up behind the person and they stick their arm behind that and then grab the person's neck, push their head towards the ground, and then they walk them forward like that. That is not the normal form. This guy has his arms, both of his arms free, so he can do anything he wants to right now. And this guy doesn't even have his hand on his neck. He just has it kind of like on his back, just kind of pushing him along. So this seems a little fake to me. I'm not going to lie. It seems like a little bit of theatrics that the Russians are putting on to try and make the Russian public think they're safe by staging a fake terror attack and then resolving the situation with a great deal of theatrics right here.
And also, it's like, where's the other guys at? There's just one guy leading him out. It's like, it seems like they'd have a whole crew.
Man, they got Barney Fife up in here taking out the freaking supposed terrorist guy. But with that, that's all the news we have from St. Petersburg. But we are seeing that the Russians are apparently trying to either stage false terrorist attacks like that one, or they're trying to just get some theatrics to make the public feel like they're safe, although they may not be. But moving on from that and down to Moscow, I cannot show you all this one. I just can talk about it for a brief moment. One of the attackers at Crocus City Hall was apparently already brought to court, and the picture is pretty whack. I'm not even really going to talk about it much because I don't know if YouTube would allow us to, but if y'all want to see it, make sure to go down the link in the description below, click on the Day 760 map, and it'll bring you directly to the map and let y'all see that right then and there. I can't show it sadly here because it's a little bit odd. It's very bizarre, and not only that, the information that's been coming out about these supposed gunmen as they're getting captured is pretty bizarre. The FSB is literally torturing these people as soon as they find them publicly, and there's not really a lot of hiding of that, at least out there, because the proof is... it's out there if you want to find it in video and picture evidence. Sadly, we just can't show that stuff here. But moving on from that and down into the area of Samara, we were able to see that another refinery has been hit dead on the nail. This video pretty much came from the attack that happened yesterday, but we can see that the fire is still burning as of today. And we can see this right here. Oh, sorry folks, this is actually the drone flying in. I don't know why in the world I got the video mixed up in my head, but there goes the drone. And near to the end of the clip, you'll watch it dive like a Stuka straight onto its target and hit the very special part of the refinery that has some pretty high-tech components inside of it. And there's the little tower right there that's going to hit. It's this one on the right side. And the drone goes... and then it's going to dive... oh, sorry, it's the one way over here. But it's going to dive right down into it right there.
Let's on final approach.
Oh!
Boom.
Oh, boom.
You know what's surprising to me when I saw this earlier today is these drone strikes are getting farther and farther away that Ukraine's conducting, but yet they're getting more accurate at the same time the farther they go. It's like the further that Ukraine wants to go and shoot these things and like fire them in oil refineries way out in the distance, they're getting better at it.
They really are, and it's something of a feat to see them getting that pinpoint accurate with a drone, and even then, nothing attempting to stop this drone after flying over 570 miles of Russian territory. Beyond that, it's time for us to move on out of the area of Samara and start moving a little bit farther back into Ukraine, because there's still a lot of news to be covered inside of Ukraine today, and also on the Russian border, because the Free Russian Army is still in Belgrade. We have not gotten any news of them being pushed out. We don't really get a lot of news from them either at this point. It appears to be a quiet, simmering war that's going on inside of Russia, but we still have a little bit to cover. But beyond that, however, a lot of people have been left since our last talk on Poland and the airspace violation that occurred last night with much to talk about and much to speak on. A lot of people are thinking that maybe the Russians ought to not be able to get a free reign over NATO airspace, and their missiles should be shot down. Or really every country in NATO should shoot down any kind of Russian aircraft that is violating their airspace without delay. A lot of people have been talking about this in the chat, and it seems like everyone's on the same page about what should be done. And so, Matthew, what are people saying, and what do you think?
All right, so the question to the audience this time is, should NATO countries shoot down every single missile that ever enters their airspace starting now? And at 91%, the overwhelming majority said yes, shoot them all down. 4% said no, only shoot down specific ones, and 1% said do not shoot down any of them. And in my opinion, like I said before, I think we should shoot any missile that enters NATO airspace down, because that simply makes sure that everyone knows our alliance is strong and that we're actually going to back up our statements. And we're not just making weak statements saying that, NATO is not going to allow any incursions on our airspace or borders and not do anything about it. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I'm with the 91%. And to be honest with you, I'm really at a loss for the other arguments, because I don't really scenario where shooting a missile over our airspace is acceptable. The only time I would ever say don't shoot it down is if shooting the missile down caused debris to fall down and kill people. That's the only point I would say maybe we should hold off before we shoot it down. But in this case, there was a clear opportunity to shoot it down in Poland, but it wasn't because of NATO's policies. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say that the 91% of y'all that said shoot them all down, is absolutely down the nail with what I'm thinking. Every single Russian aircraft that is violating NATO airspace should be shot down immediately. There should not be a single moment where they're allowed to fly in NATO airspace without constantly being targeted and destroyed. The Russians would not allow us the same liberty. If an American missile flew over their territory, they would shoot it down. And I believe that we should do the same. And also, I don't believe that that should ever be acceptable. Even if the Russians would allow our missiles to fly over their territory for some reason in a hypothetical scenario, we should not be allowing that in NATO skies. NATO skies are NATO skies for a reason. It's a part of our alliance, and we have to defend it with everything we have. Otherwise, what is the alliance for, and what is it worth? It's worth nothing at that point. And so with that, I hope I did address that well, at least in my opinion, and put an LSA in the chat if you agree. But moving on from that, and out of that bit of news, it's time for us to move on into Belgorod. As we didn't get any news from the Western Front near Shabakino, we did get some news from Gryvron, however, showing the Free Russian Army firing an ATGM at Russian forces.
Ебаш!
I don't know what kind of music that is. I like 'em big. I like 'em chunky. That's what the music is, man. You listen.
Ебаш!
I swear, dude, that is the I like 'em big song.
Close.
And there goes the ATGM. And there it goes. Boop. Right there. And it hit dead on the nail. Love to see it. Always love to see it. And great to see that the Free Russian Army is still in Ukraine. And still doing its thing. It's doing pretty well. But moving on from that, and on into the town of Belgorod. It is time for us to start talking a little bit about what's been going on in this city. Because it's actually been a pretty good bit. But before we do, I have to say this. The fundraiser is kind of hovering around $2,600. And actually, it's just gotten up to $2,675. Hey, I love to see it. Hey, I love to see it. But you know what, Matthew? I think it's time to do something that is age old here in the Lee Spring Army. It is time
What's that?
to call an order. It's time to call
order. General
order.
order.
It's time to call a general order. General order number 27, I believe, is active. If you have $5 to throw into this fundraiser, throw it in right now. I just threw in a 20 to start off strong, because you got to start these things off strong. But nevertheless, a general order has been declared, and if you have $5 and can donate to the fundraiser, and you are a part of the LSA, make sure to support, because we are going to send this fundraiser over the top and get this thing on up there, because we gotta get it over $3,000. We got to, because the Lee Spring Army has never missed a single goal. Much like the Ukrainians are fighting right now on the battlefields of Ukraine, this channel is fighting its very own battle to continue the support for Ukraine as best as we possibly can. The Lee Spring Army is dealing with this battle every single day that we are on air, and every single time that we put out a video on this channel. And tonight is going to be another night where we pass that fundraiser goal, and we continue to show not just the Russians, but the rest of the world, that the Lee Spring Army is dedicated to its cause of supporting Ukraine, and that we will continue to support the Ukrainians until this war is won. And so, hopefully, we will be able to get a... there went the map. But hopefully, we will be able to get enough...
We had goal.
Hey! Let's go, baby!
Smash the goal. The goal has been smashed. Let's go.
I love to see it. Absolutely incredible. And it's wonderful to know that so many people have supported the fundraiser tonight and helped us to get over that $3,000 goal. I have to thank every single one of y'all once again for helping this fundraiser to do what it does every single week. Y'all are helping to save lives in Ukraine. Ukraine, and I cannot thank y'all enough for that. And so, with that, I hope that does address that well, and it's time for us to move on into that little bit of Belgorod news, because we have just a little bit in here showing the damage that has been caused to the city. One of the apartment buildings has been hit. Some cars have been hit. Most importantly, a street's been hit. And then finally, the same apartment building, but from a different angle. It is showing that the Free Russian Army is...
That's weird. You did that exactly the same way I did in the Short War video earlier today. I didn't have much to say about the pictures, so I just like briskly went through them just like that.
Oh my lord, dude! Meltdown Man threw in a 350.
Hey, let's go!
Oh my lord!
3,656, 3,706 raised now, thanks to Bob Y.
Man, that's crazy. I gotta say, thank you for that. But also, it is interesting to see the attacks that occurred. Matthew, I have to say this. I did not watch the Short War video today, so it's kind of ironic that you and me did that the exact same way. It is showing that the Free Russians are still firing on the city. That's one thing that we could both agree on, and that the damage is starting to grow. But moving on from that, and out of the city of Belgorod, as the chaos continues to consume the Russians, and as we get rid of this one bot right there, bada boom, we're now going to be moving on into Ukraine, because we have a lot to talk about in Ukraine today, especially on the front lines. We got some very insightful news, some insightful information from the front lines in Ukraine, specifically around the Avdiivka area. We have about 22 minutes of raw battle footage from Avdiivka today, and it is very impressive stuff. But we want to make sure to get through the location unknowns and start working our way down there into that frontline information. But before we do, I want to make sure that we give a huge shout out to all of the top donors who've supported this fundraiser so far and helped to make it possible. And so, Matthew, who is responsible for all of this amazing help that is being given to revive Soldiers of Ukraine tonight?
All right, so calling off our top donors of the night to the fundraiser. Up first, we have the largest one of the night. That is from Meltdown Man, who threw in a $350 donation. Huge shout out to him for that very generous support. And also, a huge shout out to DCC Prime 1 as well, who put in a $250 donation, and that is also extremely massive. And then Tina put in a combined $160 to the fundraiser, who's the third largest super chatter, or not super chatter, but the donor of the night. And then we have a 100 from some guy called The Enforcer, as well as a 100 from John Albrecht. Then we have another 100 from John Albrecht. Then we have a 100 from Say What, Gene Kustra, BC Skyman. And then we have a 50 from Peter, Greg Carrier, Nick Krapf. Then we have a 50 from Mike Smith, FW Creations, Axel K, Skip Tracer 007, a 50 from Dad Good, Jeff C, Mom Cat Mind Candy, as well as Charles Hazlitt, Old Warrior, and Bob Y. So huge shout out to all the top donors of the night, and also huge shout out to everyone else, including Steve Watkins at work, who threw in a 50. And even if we weren't able to call off your donation, if it was smaller than $50, all of them add up to reach $3,829. Absolutely impressive. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to say that it's absolutely incredible that everyone has supported this fundraiser tonight so massively. It is every single week we get to see the amazing miracle the Lee Spring Army is. Y'all have some of the biggest hearts out there on the internet, and the fact that we were able to raise another $3,900 tonight already at this point in the stream is absolutely incredible. I was actually talking a little bit last night to someone who was asking, why do we not raise the fundraiser goals up to 5,000 anymore? And the answer is that the war has been going on for quite a while. And as the war keeps on going, many of the same people who continue to support the fundraisers here on this channel are continuing to support them for over 2 years now. And we always are having to keep that in account and lower the fundraiser goals little by little over the war. They used to be 10,000, then they went down to around, I think, 7.5, and then to 5, and then from 5 to 3. But one thing is clear, is that no matter what, the Lee Spring Army is always passing fundraiser goals. And no matter how long this war goes on, or no matter how exhausted the Lee Spring Army gets, it continues to march on with the same kind of determination and fervor that it had at the beginning of the war with all the means it has available to itself. That is absolutely incredible, and I got to thank everyone who we were able to shout out tonight, and everyone who we were not able to shout out tonight for helping this fundraiser to be possible. It's the greatest thing ever that we do every single Sunday, and if it wasn't for folks like y'all who did donate to these fundraisers, we wouldn't be able to help out in Ukraine the way we are and the way we have been for over 2 years now. And so with that, I hope that does address that. the best I can. And with that, it's time for us to start moving on into those questions, because we have a few questions in the chat. And also we have a big one that I want to make sure that I give a little bit of a segue into, because a lot of y'all have been talking about this, because we can't really talk about this on air. Many of y'all have seen and heard of the way that the supposed terrorists are being treated inside of Russia. Some of y'all have heard about the electrodes. Some of y'all have heard about the rod. Some of y'all have heard about the trash bag, and I bet some of y'all may be getting the references. And what we have been seeing, and I have to say this before we even get to what the poll is talking about, it's very barbaric to watch what's supposed to be law enforcement officials inside of a country treat people like that. Because you have to remember that the Russians are supposedly so civilized and so advanced that they did away with the death penalty in Russia quite a while ago, because that's just way too below and too barbaric and savage for a great civilized people like the Russians to ever undertake as some kind of an endeavor. But a lot of people have been talking about it. And interestingly enough, there's actually a even split amongst two groups of people in the live chat who think that how they're being treated is acceptable and how they're being treated is unacceptable. But Matthew, tell us about what people are thinking and what you're thinking about this topic.
All right, so we said the question is, what do you think of the Russians' treatment of the so-called extremists that attacked Moscow? And 48% said Russia is being barbaric, it's terrible. 29% said extremists get what they deserve. 14% said I'm not sure what's happening, and 9% said unsure. And obviously, we can't really even go into detail about what's happening, but it's that horrific that YouTube won't allow us to speak about it, or otherwise we might get age restricted. But it is quite horrific. There's been some very bad treatment of these fellows, to say the least. And if they are truly guilty of what they did, and these are indeed the guys who shot up all the people at the Crocus Hall event in Moscow, then I would say they need to go through due process first, just like any other country would have them go through. They need to be properly prosecuted. The evidence needs to be presented. And then, if they're guilty, then punish them. But we can see here that Russia, being the barbaric country it is, has basically started not just executing the people, but they're actually doing worse than that. And they're keeping them alive to do terrible things. And, you know, sadly, I can't go any further than that. But it's all over Twitter if you're looking for it. And it's quite bad. But Enforcer, what say you?
So, really quickly, I want to make sure, because some people are saying, are you sure about Russia not having the death penalty? Yes, I am. Because this are the abolitionists of the death penalty in blue around the world, the retentionists in red. Oh yeah, God bless America. And then in red, abolitionists in practice, with a little asterisk that says no executions in the previous 10 years. But beyond that, this is something that I gotta say is a little bit interesting, because the Russians have not executed anyone for the past 10 years. And in every country, there is an idea that there is some sort of due process before punishment is dispensed. I know a lot of people like to think that the way things should be done in a country is that if someone commits a heinous crime, that they should just be dragged out on the street and beat to death on the spot. But that's not what a civilized country is supposed to do, because we have an entire court system that is supposed to figure out whether these people are really guilty or not, and then decide what kind of punishment this person is really supposed to receive. That's how a civilized country conducts its governance, or more so carries out punishment for the violations of law. To do what I've seen happen to these guys today, it's the kind of barbarism you would never expect to really see. Because I mean, it is out there. I mean, they're not even trying to hide it. I mean, they're plugging up electrodes to these people, putting rods where they don't go. And not only that, putting them into the courtroom, still with the torture devices pretty much attached to these people when they go in. Now, one thing I will say is that many of y'all have, many people are saying they're terrorists. Yes, but that doesn't mean that you become an animal when dealing with them. Otherwise, because, and here's the thing, let me try and explain this way. Okay, so let's say that these guys are guilty, because they are. Like, for the large part, we have a good idea that these are probably the guys who conducted it, and they probably are guilty. But let's say that you don't have a guilty person and they're just assumed to be guilty, okay? Let's say that you in the chat, who's, kind of supporting this treatment of these people, let's say that one day you are accused of murder. or you're charged with murder. So when the cops come with the arrest warrant to come arrest you, instead of just putting the handcuffs on you and then letting the court system figure out later through some kind of a trial whether you're actually guilty for the crime that you're alleged of or not, instead of doing that, the cops bust down your door, smack your head into your fridge, drag you outside and beat you until you're nearly unconscious, shock your balls with some electrodes, and then throw you in prison, then choke you with a trash bag, and then throw you in court, and you've gone through all of that, and it's not even really known whether you're actually the person who did it or not, or whether you're guilty or not, and what kind of punishment you should really receive if you even committed the crime.
That's exactly the thing, Enforcer. That's exactly the thing I was thinking today. When I saw the photos coming in, I was thinking, what are the odds that the Russians have simply picked up fall guys because they couldn't actually locate the real terrorists that actually pulled it off, and they just picked up some random guys off the street, plus maybe one or two actual terrorists, and said, these are the guys, and then started doing these heinous things to them. We simply don't know because no evidence has been presented. They're basically getting a summary, slow execution, basically.
Yeah, and that's something I see one person saying they are terrorists. Yeah, but you were a murderer if you're charged with murder, right? So the cops ought to go and drag you outside your house and just beat you to death on the spot, right? Like, that's how it will work in your world. People only have to believe that you did something. Because who's to say, like Matthew's saying, that these guys are the wrong guys? The United States itself has put the wrong people in Guantanamo Bay and detained them for incredibly long amounts of time, and they're not even guilty of what the United States believes they're guilty of. And because there was no due process involved, they're just thrown in Guantanamo and falsely imprisoned just because the United States had an assumption that they were guilty, and they never proved that they were innocent or even tried to prove that they were guilty. They just assumed they were guilty, and they worked off of that. This is something that I would have to say is absolutely barbaric. There is no way to justify something like this, the treatment of an alleged criminal like this. You're supposed to have a due process that goes along with the justice system, because if this is the way we do things, then you're pretty much advocating for the return of lynch mobs and other things like that here in America, where you just have to believe that someone did a heinous crime and the whole community goes, oh, you know what, forget due process, we believe that these guys are guilty, so we're just going to go out and kill them already, just so that way we can get it done and over with. That is the most barbaric thing ever. We're here, especially in the West, especially in European countries and North American ones, we are supposed to be far more civilized than that. We are supposed to actually have some kind of a due process that goes along with charging someone with a crime, or someone actually conducting a crime. We're actually supposed to figure out, did they really commit that crime? And then if the answer is yes, what kind of punishment comes along with committing that kind of a crime?
And also, another thing, while we're still on this topic, remember, folks, y'all don't get to see this all the time because it's not publicized everywhere, and it shouldn't be because it's heinous. But this is the same treatment, if not worse, that they're giving to the Ukrainian soldiers when they're captured as POWs. This is the torture treatment that these soldiers are getting at the hands of the Russians. And imagine if this is the level of depravity the Russians are willing to go to open in the public in their own court system. Imagine what they're doing behind closed doors to the Ukrainian soldiers that are POWs that are getting captured. It's probably worse than that. And that's why Russia has to be prosecuted for the war crimes, because what they're doing is sick. And these guys right here are just the tip of the iceberg as to how heinous Russia really is with these torture tactics.
And some people are saying, you've never been face to face with these people. I don't have to be. That's not how the system works. I don't know if people don't get that. But what you're saying is, because I have to put this out there again, but here in the West, because I'm not talking about what the Russians do, and I don't believe what they do is right at all. In the West, you're innocent until proven guilty. So let's say Dallas Borkua, because you're the person I just saw in the live chat bring up, you've never seen these people face to face. I've never seen you face to face, but let's say that you're charged with the crime of, I don't know, grape, if you know what I mean. We can't say the actual word on YouTube, but let's say that you're charged with the crime of grape. Well, now you're a grapist, according to what we're saying right here. I may have never seen you, but damn it, you are guilty. I don't need a court system to tell me that or anything. You ought to be dragged out into the street and stoned. I mean, that's what we're arguing for right there, is that kind of a system where there isn't even due process, it's just straight up lawlessness. and you pretty much just have vigilantes running around as the cops, dispensing justice how they think it's fit, and probably barbaric justice at that, like the Russians are doing. Or we would sit there and say, okay, you're charged with that, but we really don't know if you're guilty of that or not. So let's give it a little while for everyone to collect the evidence and present the evidence for your innocence and for your guilt, and figure out if you're actually innocent or guilty, and then sentence you. So that's kind of the two different systems we have going on right there. And I would say that is certainly the system I'd rather go with, is the one where you don't get tortured out up front, even if you're not actually guilty of the crime, and then later on they try and figure out if you're guilty or not. And this is going to be a show trial. These guys may not even be the actual guys that conducted that attack, and they're going to go and probably throw them in prison and murder these people in prison. So I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And I see someone in the chat saying, as you can see, most don't agree with you on this. Hey man, I don't care, because you know something? If I'm arrested in America, I know that that's the way the justice system is going to treat me here. And I hate to say this, but thank God people like you aren't cops, because I would hate to see what you would do if you were a cop and you were told someone committed a crime, to see you go out there and try and arrest someone. That would be
Some people like that are cops, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah, well, you know, that's, well, luckily in the United States, we frown upon that kind of treatment of people, and we usually prosecute cops, hopefully find the bad eggs and prosecute the cops to do that kind of stuff, because that is kind of wild that you would advocate for torturing someone just because they may have committed the crime. We don't even know if these are the actual people yet. They just captured some random people and are already torturing them on the spot. That's barbaric. That's just barbaric as hell. What if you're the person that they captured and you weren't even there? You just look like them. They didn't even identify these people. They just said, "Yep, that's him. Torture him," and they tortured him on the spot. That is barbaric as hell. I cannot believe that folks like you are trying to argue that torturing people on the spot that you believe committed the crime is the right way to go. That's insane. Like, it actually blows me away. I don't even know how to really react to that. Because you're saying that, and based off your username, you're an American, you're saying that while living in a justice system, in a country that has a justice system, that is the complete opposite of that. So you've never had to deal with anything like this. And on top of that, if they're treating these guys like this, how do the Russian cops treat normal people who've committed normal crimes? You know, like speeding or public drunkenness or something like that. How do they treat those people? I bet you they beat the hell out of these people and extort them for lunch money or something on the side of the street. I mean, that is barbaric as hell, no matter what.
Also, you know, when they're doing this stuff, like, they're not getting quality confessions out of these people. And also, I don't think that's the main reason they're doing it either. I think I hesitate to say the words. I don't know if YouTube's going to get crazy about it, but they're torturing these people to try to send a message to other people. Do not recreate what these guys did, or even if that's not the guys that did it, that it sends the symbolism across the same way. They're trying to send a message here. They're really not trying to get a confession out of these guys, because what is there to confess? It seems like the Russians have already made their mind up. These are their guys. So, you know, it pretty much is that.
And I would have to agree completely, but I hope I addressed that well. I see a lot of people agreeing with us, see some people disagreeing. I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree. But on this one particular instance, because usually I say that no one's wrong, but torturing people on the outset of arresting them is just flat out wrong. Like, there's no way that I can actually even say that there's a fair argument for that. Here in the West, especially where I live in the United States, it's innocent until proven guilty. Even if you were caught with, like, for example, let's just say, you know, you conducted some kind of a heinous crime and you ended up killing people. Even if you were caught with the weapon in hand, that you were going to be treated as innocent until proven guilty, until they actually get you in a court to a trial, or you get a plea deal or something. But until you get into a court in a trial where they present the evidence and they prove you to truly be guilty, and then they sentence you to some sort of a punishment. That is the way that it should work. Because if it worked any other way, my God, you are living in one of the most barbaric, oppressive countries on the planet. God knows what they do to normal people, because if they're doing this to some of the worst offenders, worst alleged offenders in their country, who knows how they treat the common folks of Russia. And I would be scared to see what it really does look like. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are now going to be moving on. into the rest of our location unknowns. Starting off with some very weird looking Russian protection on this armored personnel carrier. It appears that they're trying to put some kind of steel prongs on the front of the APC to see if it's going to slow down the drone or stop it from hitting onto a hard surface and exploding. We don't really know if that's going to work, but that is still a very weird way to attempt to protect an APC. And it also completely stops any Russian soldiers from trying to use the front of the APC as something to ride on. So, a little bizarre. I don't think this is going to catch on, but we are seeing that the Russians are trying some new protective measures. But moving on from that and into our next bit of Location Unknown news, we were also able to get a interesting mini documentary from United 24 talking about the Patriot surface-to-air missile system versus the Russian Air Force. We know what comes out on top, but here's the clip.
At the end of February 2024, the Ukrainian Armed Forces officially declared, "Oops, we did it again." What did they mean by that? February 2022, Putin declares that during the first days of the full-scale invasion, all Ukrainian aviation and air defense systems were destroyed. 2 years have passed, and here's what the supposedly destroyed Ukrainian Air Force is doing. Overall, in just a couple of weeks, at the end of February and beginning of March, Ukrainians shot down over a dozen enemy aircraft. Among them, a dozen Su-34 fighter bombers valued at $33 to $50 million each. Although there have been even more valuable trophies recently. The Russians unleashed a full-scale war having 9 A-50s, large 4-engine aircraft based on the Il-76. It's an airborne early warning and control aircraft, a powerful radar that can monitor enemy aviation and air defense systems within a 600-kilometer radius and adjust missile strikes. Considering the value of such aircraft and the highly trained and invaluable crew, the Russians always kept the A-50 away from the front line. But not far enough. On January 14th, an A-50 was shot down and crashed into the Sea of Azov. Along with it, Ukrainians also downed an Il-22M1.
Actually, I have to correct that here. They did not down the IL-22M1. The IL-22M1 was stricken near to the vertical stabilizer as well as the elevators. It suffered serious damage and some sort of a hydraulic failure, but ended up limping all the way across the Azov Sea into Rostov-on-Don, where it landed, and we were able on this channel to get picture and video evidence confirming that the aircraft had survived the hit, but had pretty much already been destroyed, hardly limping back and surviving the attack in the first place. So sadly, this part of this video has already been proven untrue here on this channel. It would be nice if they did shoot down an IL-22M1, but the reality is that it was heavily damaged and was able to limp back to Rostov-on-Don.
M1, another rare airborne command post. Perhaps it managed to reach the airfield, but its career as an aircraft has definitely ended.
Wait a minute. Hang on. So why in the world? Hang on. I'm sorry. I'm confused. Because they said that they shot it down and it went down in the Sea of Azov, and then they said perhaps it did return, and then they showed the literal picture I was talking about, showing the heavy damage to the stabilizer and everything. That's like, why say it was taken down? Like, we even have the proof right here that it did make it back to Rostov, and it was heavily damaged.
It's like the editor realized after the fact, I think I might have wrote the wrong thing in the story, but I didn't want to go back and re-edit that segment, so he just kind of modified it at the end.
I mean,
like that.
I respect that, because sometimes we feel like that, but we literally will just throw out the whole edit and redo the whole thing if we don't like something. But anyways, getting back to the video.
Definitely ended. The downing of the A-50 was the first destruction of a long-range early warning and control aircraft since 1969, when a North Korean MiG-21 shot down an American EC-121. At the time of the attack, the Russian A-50 was 100 to 150 kilometers away from the front line. In theory, Ukrainian S-300s or Patriots could have reached it, but the Russians insisted that it was friendly fire from their own air defense. Ironically, the A-50 itself is an element of air defense and is supposed to coordinate it. However, things became even more mysterious. Another A-50 was shot down on February 23rd, but this time it was located as far as 250 kilometers from the front line. So how did the Ukrainians increase the pace of destroying Russian frontline aviation so much and reach so far? In reality, no one knows for sure. One of the versions has already been dubbed the Wandering Patriot. It refers to the American air defense system that lurks near the front line, launches missiles at enemy aircraft, and immediately changes position. The Norwegian NASAMS system can operate in a similar manner. However, this doesn't explain the downing of the second A-50 beyond the reach of both these systems. Forbes, for example, put forward its version. The S-200 is a Soviet missile from the 1960s with a range of up to 300 kilometers. It's a powerful weapon. When detonated near the target, it disperses about 10,000 metal elements. However, these old missiles are difficult to store and transport. That's why over 10 years ago Ukraine withdrew them from service. But it seems that in a desperate situation, they managed to restore or obtain at least several of them from allies. The situation seems hopeless as Ukrainian air defense systems need to protect thousands of kilometers of their land. Ukraine has only a few batteries of Patriots and similar modern systems capable of shooting down cruise and ballistic missiles attacking Ukrainian cities daily. Furthermore, Patriot and NASAMS batteries launch missiles of American production, and the United States hasn't supplied any ammunition to Ukraine since December. Although the necessity of these supplies is evident, a Patriot launch costs several $million, whereas the enemy aircraft it shoots down are worth at least tens of millions. The Russian industry produces approximately 20 combat aircraft per year. Thus, according to Forbes calculations, the Russians lose aircraft 20 times faster than they can replace them. Aviation
Dang, how
has
the hell do
become
they
a
only
key
make
factor in the war.
20 a year?
I mean, hell, man, they are so, like, it's really a cost side of things because the Russian military has such a low budget and therefore the Air Force has such a low budget that they place small orders. And also on top of that, Russian aviation industry is wildly small. Like if you look at the actual production figures post-Soviet Union inside of Russia for aircraft and airframes, it is very minuscule. Most of everything they have is pretty much a heritage fleet that is left over from the Soviet Union. Very rarely does anything come into being brand new post-Soviet Union.
Yeah, that's wild. Only 20 a year. I would have thought they were making more. I knew Russia was bad off with their industries and things like that in manufacturing, but that's just abysmal.
It is. And what is abysmal about that is that while they're making 20 a year, the F-35, and let me go over here and get the F-35, not the F-235, but the F-35. Over the course of, let me see here, 2015 to now, which has been 9 years, the United States has built over 1,000 F-35 Lightnings, which means that we've built, over the course of 9 years, about 100 of the F-35s a year, per year.
Interesting.
And by the way, just to put that out there, why that's such a big disparity is that the F-35 technologically and also on a constructional level is far more difficult to produce than anything the Russians are able to make, yet we're able to pump out about 100, 110 of them per year at this point.
On March 24th, 2023, 10 Russian Su-35 fighters attacked the city of Sumy in northeastern Ukraine and dropped new types of munitions, guided aerial bombs. These are old Soviet satellite-guided aerial bombs with deployable wings, similar to NATO's GLSDB. The effective range of even the simplest guided aerial bombs reaches 50 kilometers, and the explosive power looks like this. Such strikes can even be felt in underground shelters. The depth of the crater after such an explosion reaches up to 10 meters. Due to delays in support from the key allies, Ukrainians cannot hold back the Russian onslaught. The enemy army senses its chances, and planes conduct more bombings closer to the front line, dropping hundreds of guided aerial bombs per day to suppress Ukrainian forces and advance further. Avdiivka is all about guided aerial bombs, wrote Yegor Tsukor, a fighter from the 3rd Airborne Assault Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. It feels like the largest number of air bombs dropped in such a small area of land in the entire history of humanity. Aerial bombs simply destroyed the strongholds that Ukrainians used to hold Avdiivka.
Just this week alone, Russian terrorists have already used 400 guided aerial bombs, about 60 Shahed drones, and over 40 missiles. No state in Europe could withstand such pressure, such evil alone. Therefore, it is important now to be together with everyone who values life and does not want this terror to come home to other nations.
Only serious losses and introduction of advanced long-range weapons to the Ukrainian Air Force can force the Russians to retreat. Thus, after the destruction of 15 of their aircraft in a row at the beginning of March, the commander of the Ukrainian Air Force announced, "The sky is clear." Not a single enemy aircraft was detected near the front line. Overall, since the beginning of the invasion, Russia has lost about 350 aircraft and a similar number of helicopters. According to various estimates, the Russian Air Force currently has about 250 to 310 Su-34s and Su-35s. In contrast, Ukraine has several times fewer and more outdated combat aircraft, and few modern air defense systems passed on by allies. Even in such conditions, they're constantly risking at the front lines, creatively using long-forgotten S-200 systems and doing everything to defend their land and sky. And they do it extremely effectively. The pilots of the 350 downed Russian aircraft would certainly agree with that.
Yeah, baby! But that's the end of the clip, talking about the air defense systems of Ukraine and how they've been combating the Russians. But with that, it's time for us to move on to the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours. And hopefully there's no typos in this today, but oh my lord! Good googly moogly!
10 Bobcats in a day? What
Oh!
the hell's going on, man?
Impressive stuff is what's going on. 10 Bobcat skid steers were destroyed over the past 24 hours, along with 990 Russian soldiers meeting their end on the battlefields of Ukraine, and 28 armored personnel carriers doing the same, along with 63 supply trucks, 24 main battle tanks, 44 artillery systems, 47 drones, and nothing else. Overall, it was a really good day, and wonderful to know that the Ukrainians were able to inflict such high casualties on the Russian forces and stop them dead in their tracks once again. Moving on from that and into the front lines where those losses were had today, we are going to be starting off just near the Severodonetsk area, where we got to see a Baba Yaga blowing up a Russian tank and giving us one hell of a turret toss. We actually got to see it from the Baba Yaga's perspective. Kabui, and there's the turret. It's that black mass right there near the crosshair. It flies right by the Baba Yaga. Look at that again.
Baba Yaga, Baba Yaga. Oh my goodness gracious, Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga, Baba Yaga. But with that, that's the end of the clip. Wonderful to see that they were able to blow up a tank so thoroughly that it ended up creating a turret toss that almost actually took out the Baba Yaga itself. But moving on from that and down into the area of Bakhmut, we were able to see some more interesting things happen down here today. But first, a battlefield analysis. We have to have a battlefield analysis. Over the past 24 hours, not a damn thing. And it's great to see that because the Ukrainians are the ones in the defensive right now. So if nothing's moving, it's good. So moving on from that, we got to see a little infographical video, a documentary, telling us how the NCOs of the Ukrainian army are trained, which was very insightful and very interesting. Here's the clip.
Я штурмовик! Я штурмовик! Я похую! Мне похую! Я к вам приду! Я к вам приду! И всех убью! И всех убью!
Sergeant School.
Строй! Строй! Минус!
Офіцер, він відповідає за напрямок, за мотивацію. Він має пояснити, навіщо, тобто окреслити, куди. А сержант відповідає за слово «як». Як це виконувати.
Уважно всі слухаємо командира відділення, рацію і тому подобне. Плюс? Плюс.
Це більш дотичність до поля бою. Це дотичність до хлопців, до фронтових буднів. Воно завжди буде мати більшість прихильників. І ми це культивуємо. Тобто ми показуємо через власний приклад, тому чому сержант – це якраз от та людина, яка лідер на полі бою.
Левый фланг, прицельно, по 2 патрона!
Wait, man, he just said, fire two group. Did you see that? He said, fire 2 shots. He said, 2 group.
Let's see it.
Let me go back. Here we go.
Це якраз от та людина, яка лідер на полі бою.
Левый фланг, прицельно, по 2 патрона!
2 rounds, 2 group. 2 group.
2 group. Also, look at that Holosun with the
Так от-
magnifier on. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty. I actually know someone, Matthew, who has that Holosun and magnifier.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's actually a cheaper optic set. It only costs about $450 for the actual Holosun and the magnifier, which is actually really cheap for what it is. I think it is like a 4 times magnifier as well, so it gives you like the same kind of zoom that an ACOG would.
Very nice. It's definitely cheaper than EOTech. That'd be at least $1,000 for them.
Yeah, or ACOG, which would be like $1,200 for a 4 times magnification scope at that rate. But getting back to the video.
І так от створилась ідея створити нашу сержантську школу, такий інтенсивний курс. А мені потрібно було створити нову систему інструкторів, яка зможе створити оцей стовпець сержантства, яка зможе створити систему, яка буде давати нам відновлення, яка буде нам створювати лідерів, навчати командирів, навчати солдатів, не відриваючись від бойових дій. От якщо просто дістати книжку, мануал, настанову радянську, американську, там немає рецепту. Рецепт – це досвід, як це застосовувати. Треба приклади. Ми брали кращі настанови Заходу, адаптували їх під наше озброєння, під нашу ментальність і під нашу війну.
Все, починаємо.
І нарізається ситуація, яка імітує реальні сучасні бойові дії. Тобто скупчення, по-любому щось прилетить, ти з'явиш, станеш пріоритетною ціллю. Там впаде дрон, пристріляється міномет.
Бам! Разорвала сраку, нахуй! Лежишь, орешь! Орешь, лежишь! Я ее в следующий раз в ебальники кину! Не тупим! Двигаемся! Вы нахуй отсюда рассасываетесь, блядь!
Man, that's something that I'm always saying, man. You gotta spread out. Like, like you really do have to spread out.
Давай швидше, блядь! Что, можно не затягивать? Крути нахуй нормально, блядь!
Ми намагаємося створити їм таку ситуацію, в якій вони вже були. Тобто небезпечну ситуацію з поля бою, занурити їх знову. Да, є втрати, да, постійні евакуації, де провальні операції були, ми з ними їх розбираємо. Перша штурмова операція зазвичай, вона в них провалюється.
Группа чистит здание.
Oh, that was really nice. Did you see that? Wow. An M16. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't look like it has a. Is it? I don't think that's a. That's not like a slab upper, is it? Some of our gun experts might be able to tell us because it looks like it might be on a Picatinny up there, the carry handle, or that might just be a straight up M16 A2 from what I can tell. Still really cool.
Он автомат не держит, держи его в сектор, пока он не держит автомат, чтобы его не закрыли. Чивос, насыпать в левую сторону? Нет! Обратно, обратно! А что обратно? Вы меня забыли! Как только вы закрепились в доме, все, вы поняли, что вы закрепились, сразу рывок нахуй делаем. Чем больше будет натиска, тем больше им будет страшно с вами воевать, потому что они подумают, что вы ебанутые нахуй, что вы так лезете. Поверьте мне, это работает. Бьерн, что за хуйня? Что мне у вас кинуть надо, чтобы вы, блядь, поняли? Я раз ебанул вас за то, что вы скупчились. Этот же, блядь, нахуй, объединенный.
Я вибачаюсь, но я хотів доповісти, що нас 300 в штаб. Ніхто не відповідав мені в ответ. Ніхто, блядь. Я вже, блядь, 10 раз.
Не будет рация троить. Замотайтесь все на ус. Вы не должны друг к другу подходить близко. Вас не должно быть больше двух, нахуй. Сейчас, блядь, каждый гусь, блядь, летает и пускает FPV. Ми теж ростемо. Тобто ми працюємо так само, коли я пророблю сценарії, пророблю розбір помилок з курсантами. Після також курсанти вже сплять, а ми з інструкторами збираємося і проговорюємо свої дії. Робимо, щоб стати ще ефективніше.
Приготовились! Старт! Иду!
Oh, that was beautiful. Man, I'm sorry, y'all. I know I'm like just absolutely fanboying over some of these guns, but look at that perfect condition Bakelite, man. Like not a single scratch. Like it's a perfect color all the way through. That is a beautiful Bakelite right there. Probably about $140 on the collector's market.
Whoa. 140 for a mag. What are they, nuts?
Yeah, I mean, like, those things are rare in America, especially in that kind of condition. Impressive stuff.
Oh, jeez, I'm telling you.
Пострелял, спрятался, опять в той же самой позиции, вытащил голову, опять пострелял, спрятался. 2 раза прокатит, на 3-й раз пидор поймет, где ты стреляешь, он просто вскинет автомат, только ты поднимаешь голову, нахуй, тебе летит в голову. Поэтому после каждого выстрела меняем позицию, запомните.
Пулемет на удуна.
Силуэт спрячьте, блядь! Я не слышу огонь, тебе пустые!
У нас все четко.
Что по командам там?
Does he have a crank? Oh my god, he's got a crank.
план был...
Wow, dude, this is like the collector's circuit of like guns here. Like, these are some cool stuff. And then they even mix in like the modern furniture, like the skeleton furniture with it. I mean, overall, this is just a cool video just to see all the guns they got.
Hey, it's crazy.
Еще самое важное, самая база. Никто, блядь, не дублировал толком команду.
Oh, there's the crank! Oh, never
Командир
mind.
отделения,
You know
эта
what, we'll just
информация
like, keep
до
going.
вас доносилась, но дубляжа ее не было. Поэтому ему приходилось надрывать голову, блядь, не до всех доходило.
There it is, Matthew. It's the crank. You see it right here at the bottom left? It's the crank with the short barrel.
I cannot believe it.
Man, you know how expensive those things are in America? These things are like $3,000 to $5,000 for a real crank. Yeah, really expensive.
Oh, no. You could get an HK 5.56 for that. You could pretty much get anything for that cost. That's too much, man. Too much.
But it's a freaking crank. I mean, it's so cool. And like, Patty,
I don't care what it's called. I'm not paying that much for an
Hold
old
up.
Soviet gun.
Hold up, AKS-74U. Let me go type in its real name and show you this, because they're really cool. I mean, there's a reason why they're highly sought after. I mean, it's what the Draco is supposed to be, if you know what I mean. Like, this is a crank. Like, this is kind of like a beat up crank, but it's still a crank. These things are like the carbine version of the AK with a very short barrel, really cool little flash hider on it. Overall, these are highly sought after here in the States.
Oh, I don't know about that. You tell me $5,000 for that? Hell no, not in a million years.
But man, you could put a silencer on this thing, you know, you can make it pretty cool looking. I mean, you know, they're pretty.
Man, you could get a Daniel Defense M4A SOCOM workhorse and absolutely rig it out. You could put everything on it. The nice optic, the foregrip, flashlight, laser, all that stuff, and still be under that cost.
Man, maybe, but it's a crank. So it gets a reason.
Информация только спустя какое-то время. А мы знаем, что, блядь, в таком моменте, блядь, скорость принятия решений самое важное. Давайте становиться профессиональнее, учитывать свои ошибки в будущем. Они спасут жизнь вам, а еще важнее, блядь, вашим, блядь, подчиненным.
А ми прививаємо, тобто, розуміння сержанту, що він відповідає за особовий склад. Що коли вони пройдуть там, на нозі там, 5 кілометрів, займуть цю посадку, відкинуть штурм, тобто відкинуть накат противника, їм потрібно буде закапуватись, робити фортифікаційні споруди, а сил немає, де їх взяти. І тут є дисципліна, і тут приходить сержант.
Итак, ну что нам дан сегодняшний день? Будем с вами готовиться к обороне.
Перед сержантами стоїть задача організувати оборону взводного опорного пункту. Вони прийшли вже на більш-менш підготовлені позиції, їх треба вдосконалити, зробити резервні позиції, виставити кулеметні точки, точки для роботи протитанкових засобів, організувати стаб-пункт, КСП, тобто, в принципі, організувати повну оборонну позицію для свого взводу.
По возможности нам надо их немножко углубить, особенно те места, где больше всего у вас будет движений, и чем-то перекрыть, чтобы, блядь, нейтрализовать угрозу, блядь, прицельных сбросов по вам с мавиков.
А занимайте давайте оборону, ёбаный рот. Тут работы очень много. Что делать?
Что отсюда по высоте сможешь стрелять, чи нет?
Конечно. Я же специально и выбрал эту позицию, она по высоте чуть-чуть еще окопаться, и все, я уже идеально, ну то есть у меня даже сейчас сектор идеально просматривается.
Нам надо огневую точку себе выбрать. И если мы рисуем индивидуально карточку огня, то нужно сразу себе ориентиры позначить. Здесь передо мной я вижу там поодиноке дерево, слева наблюдаю еще что-то похожее на блиндаж. Вот, два ориентира уже есть.
И сделать нормальную пулеметную позицию где-то на высоте и укрыть пулемет. Одного фаертима должно хватить.
Когда-то копал окоп в Богдановке и думаю, хорошо, что началась война, не надо копать огород.
we're actually going to be ending the clip here because we still have a lot of news to go. But if y'all want to watch the rest of this video, make sure to click on the link in the description below to the Day 760 map, and y'all be able to go to this area of Bakhmut and check out the entire clip on your own. But I want to make sure to get y'all to the more impressive videos that we have further south at Avdiivka, because we were able to get loads of raw battlefield footage today. It was an unbelievable amount. But moving on to our next clip, we did get to see that the Ukrainians were able to claim another Russian tank in this area destroyed here on this clip. When you see it smoldering and burning and then finally exploding and seeing the turret not that high up. I would give that like a 3 out of 10 for a turret toss. It wasn't a lot of altitude.
No, man, that's a 10 out of 10. That's just so much weight going up like that. I don't know. That one to me is a 10.
I don't know. It's a 3 to me. But y'all let us know in the chat what y'all think. Is it a 10? Is it a 3? What is it? Or is it somewhere in between? But with that, we're going to be moving on down into the area of Avdiivka, where we got to see that the Russians are cluster bombing the Avdiivka coke plant and apparently setting a mortar on fire in the process, or a mortar position on fire. And there it goes, up in flames. Nice.
Oh, blyat. It's a small sun on the ground, blyat. It's very hot, like solar flare, geomagnetic storm.
Blyat! But anyways, I see that clip. And now it's time for me to move y'all on into raw footage of the defense of the town of Orlivka to the west of Avdiivka, just from the past few days. It's about 1 minute and 24 seconds long, and I want to make sure that we review this just one more time to make sure it's all good. Looks all good to me. Here's the clip.
Идем штурмовать. В мире не без урода, как говорится. Это я про оккупантов. Давайте, я штурмовик! Не вахую! Я к вам приду и всех убью!
You see an explosion right there?
Куда? Ты меня разозлил, Ванька! Сдавайся, пидорас! Я тебе говорил, Ванька, на Сибири бы оставался, нахуй! Долбоёб!
We're going to have to mute that now due to the music ramping up and probably being copyright. We see them firing an AT weapon at the Russians. We see them wandering around amongst the destroyed houses of Orlivka as they continue to affect the defense of the town, tossing a nade into one building, setting fire to another. I gotta tell you, I don't know where
Look at that. Look at that shooting, man.
I don't know where they're getting some of this AK furniture, Matthew, but I kind of want it, you know? Oh, look, cute little doggo.
Oh, poor dog.
Firing an RPG. Don't do that on YouTube, by the way. For some reason, they have a way of exploding every single time. But that's the end of the clip. Nice to see the 3rd Assault Brigade doing its thing. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we were able to see the battles of the Avdiivka direction from the view of the 3rd Assault Brigade, which we will not be seeing now, because apparently it's a little spicy. I didn't notice that earlier, but hey, you know, sometimes some spicy pops up. Moving on from that, we're going to be checking out this Ukrainian tank fending off a Russian armored attack 3-1, with the Russians outnumbering the Ukrainians a whole 3-1. We're going to be muting that, but here comes the Russian tanks. We see them rolling on along. And we see one of them get hit by this Ukrainian tank right here that's just scooting and shooting. We see one of the Russian tanks already brewing up. And the Ukrainian tank won the engagement. Huzzah, or as the British would say, huzzay. But anyways, moving on from that and out of the area and into our next clip, we were able to see that the Russians were dropping some Fab 1500s onto the Ukrainian forces in Krasnoyarivka today. These Fab 1500s are some of the largest airdropped bombs, as my ears just get freaking, you know, blasted by the audio. But we can see the Fab 1500s exploding inside the town of Krasnoyarivka right there. And we see the smoke covering the entire town pretty much after the explosion. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there. But very nice to see that they were able to, once again, stave the front and hold the area, although still being under heavy barrage by Russian forces. Moving on from that, it's time for us to move all the way down to Rostov-on-Don really quickly, because we did hear that Putin is planning on building a railway, and this is just a British Ministry of Defense report that pretty much summarizes the entire thing. What Putin is planning on doing is building a massive railway over the land bridge that's been created Crimea into Crimea. It's going to be one that is a lot more effective than the current railroad infrastructure that exists in Ukraine, and it's going to be serving as a second link to Crimea outside of the Kerch Strait, because the Kerch Strait has proven to be very temperamental, and not only that, a massive target that can easily be destroyed and knocked out by the Ukrainians if they choose to. So the Russians are planning on building a railroad bridge. That's really what that entire report was summarizing. Moving on from that and into the Kherson area, where we're also able to see that the Russians apparently hit a mock-up SPG that the Ukrainians set up to try and fool the Russians and make them waste valuable munitions, which they actually ended up doing. Here's the clip. There's the mock-up SPG that the Ukrainians have set up right there, and the Russians just took the bait, hit it, and plywood goes flying everywhere as they find out it's a decoy.
Макет. Согласен.
They just silently look. There's no explosion, no fire. It's just nothing. They just hit a straight up decoy. But moving on from that and out of the Kherson area, it's time for us to move all the way up north and to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 760 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech.
I wish you health.
Oh no. Bitch. No, we ain't having that American audio track. We're going back to Ukrainian original. Here's the clip.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Перша вдячність нашим захисникам неба, усім воїнам мобільних вогневих груп, нашої авіації, ППО, сухопутних військ, усім фахівцям нашої РЕП. Дякую за кожну збиту ракету, за кожний збитий шахет. Звичайно, наш повітряний щит потребує значного посилення. Ми працюємо над цим з усіма партнерами, чиї рішення можуть змінити характер цієї війни та убезпечити наші міста і села від терору. Але вже зараз, принаймні частину ракет і більшість шахедів наші воїни збивають. За цей тиждень, від понеділка і по сьогодні, російські терористи застосували майже 190 ракет різних типів та майже 140 шахедів, ще майже 700 керованих авіабомб. Жодного тижня ще не було за понад 2 роки цієї війни, коли б Росія утрималась від терору. І ми робимо усе можливе, щоб нашу цілком справедливу відповідь на цей терор окупаційний контингент відчував так само кожного тижня, кожного дня. Дякую всім нашим героям, які знищують логістику на окупованій території, які очищують Крим і Чорне море від присутності окупанта. Це складне завдання, але поступово наші воїни його виконують. Всі це бачать. І, звичайно, я хочу окремо відзначити сьогодні всі елементи наших сил оборони та безпеки України, які мінусують російський потенціал війни. Чим менше путінська система заробить грошей, чим сильніші будуть санкції проти неї та фізичне знищення російського потенціалу війни, тим швидше Україна, наша Європа та весь світ знов відчують спокій. Зараз у частині наших областей триває робота з відновлення після російських ударів у ніч на цю п'ятницю. Я вдячний усім, хто працює без перерви у Харкові, щоб повернути людям електрику і тепло. Ситуація дуже складна. Більше 200 тисяч абонентів квартир та будинків у місті Харків та в одному з районів області без стабільного електропостачання. Діють доволі жорсткі графіки по електриці. Місцева влада, всі служби, уряд чітко розуміють терміни і технічну основу для нормалізації ситуації. В інших регіонах постачання електрики всім споживачам відновлено. Дякую кожному, хто забезпечив цей результат. І усім світі, всім нашим партнерам, хто підтримав Україну після такої підлої атаки проти нашої енергетики. Ще одне. Цей тиждень дав багато результатів у відносинах з партнерами. Євросоюз. Рішення про фонд допомоги Україні обсягом 5 мільярдів євро. Це суттєво підтримує наш захист. Є також і новий транш макрофіну від Євросоюзу – 4,5 мільярди євро. МВФ. Є рішення про новий транш – майже 900 мільйонів доларів. Канада є 2 мільярда канадських доларів макрофіну прямої бюджетної підтримки. Є хороші результати щодо пакетів оборонної підтримки. Є і отримані пакети, і оголошені нові. Це артилерія, дрони, бронетехніка. Також щойно я говорив з прем'єр-міністром Іспанії Санчесом, і щодо ППО для України нам потрібно більше систем. Ми говорили про нашу взаємодію з Іспанією на двосторонньому рівні та в європейських інституціях. Я вдячний Іспанії за незмінну підтримку та незмінну нашу спільну впевненість, що життя обов'язково має перемогти. Головне – не втомлюватись, не збавляти нашої активності, не втрачати віри в Україну, в наших людей і в нашу можливість донести світу, що ворог людського життя не має права виграти. Путін не має права виграти. Він повинен втратити можливість ламати життя інших. І тільки це може стати основою спільної безпеки наших людей, усіх європейців, усього світу. Дякую усім, хто з Україною. Слава усім нашим воїнам, усьому нашому народу. Слава Україні!
And Hiram
Slava.
And with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 760 of the war. And that begins the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all. I absolutely love this segment. It's the one that makes me the happiest, because we get to literally just talk to y'all about whatever y'all want to talk about. We can talk about the war, we can talk about where y'all are, where y'all from, what's your favorite food, what interesting historical topics y'all want to talk about. We can talk about literally anything. I mean, the sky's the limit. But I do want to thank everyone really quickly for helping this fundraiser to be possible tonight and getting it up to $4,300. That is very impressive. That is 50% nearly over the goal, which was $3,000 tonight. Y'all continue to show day in and day out, week after week, that the Lee Spring Army is not out of the game. Dang!
Oh, 333 from Hal Rose.
Legendary!
Am I seeing this?
You are seeing this! It happened! We got up to 4,000.
Do my eyes deceive me, Bliat? Am I seeing things? Is that my ship going down into the ocean, Bliat? Is it turning into a submarine before my eyes, Bliat? Yes, it is. And that $333 donation just came through, Bliat. I can't believe it.
I gotta tell you, Matthew, that hit harder than the FSB. But beyond that, it is absolutely incredible to see that this channel, now that Hal Rose threw in his $333 donation, which was absolutely incredible, has now been able to raise $4,622.
Whoa!
Whoa!
Heard of Corgis just threw in a $1,000 donation. Let's go!
Oh my god! It is now up. I'm sorry, correction. It's now up to $5.6 thousand raised for Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. Herda Corgis threw in the biggest donation of the night to Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. Unbelievable. I have to shout for this. I'm so sorry if I woke some of y'all up from your nice slumber. This is worth being woken up for. Herda Corgis just threw in a $1,000 donation to Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. That is literally almost 20%. It's a little less than 20%, but it's almost 20% of all of the funds raised tonight just came from Herda Corgis. I want everyone to give a huge thanks to all of the top donors and all of the donors tonight, and not only that, specifically to Hal Rose and Herda Corgis, who are the two largest donors of this fundraiser tonight, helping to save lives in Ukraine again through their massive support and efforts. And once again, proving that the Lee Spring Army is truly, absolutely incredible. And I got to thank you all both for being a part of it. Now, with that in mind, I also have to say this. I have to thank you all so much for everyone who's watched so far tonight. Now, that's something I really feel like I have to touch on, because somehow tonight, we were actually talking about this before stream, because for the past 2 weeks, this stream has been getting on average around nearly 8,000 live viewers or higher than that every single day. We don't know why people are coming to this channel so much now, because back in the day, it used to be around 4,500 to 5,000 people on live per night, which was still one of the largest. I think it was the largest Ukraine war live stream still, but we felt like that was a viewership that, was appropriate. But now there are so many people coming here that tonight there was 9.5 thousand people here live again. And it's blowing us away that so many people are coming to this channel and watching. And I got to tell y'all that we are always greatly appreciative for every single one of y'all being here, the thousands of y'all that are here live every single night. And I'm so appreciative to the 61,000 people who have watched this stream since it started. We are greatly appreciative of every single one of y'all and y'all's presence. Y'all make this live stream a lot more worthwhile to do because there are so many of y'all here that really do enjoy our news. And we get to feel like we're actually talking to a lot of people and helping to get out the news to so many folks out there who may have not heard it today. I got to thank y'all for that. I got to thank y'all for being here with us tonight. And most importantly, I got to thank y'all for helping to support this fundraiser because the fundraiser ended up being unbelievable tonight. It's one of the larger ones that we've had recently at $5,622, and it's just unbelievable. Matthew, before I become speechless, make sure to tell us who the top donors in between the last segment and this one are.
All right, so the top donors since the last time we called them off are obviously Herd of Corgis, who threw in that $1,000 donation. I must have said $100,000, but they threw in that $1,000 donation, which is massive. We also had a $333 donation from Hal Rose, as well as a $50 from James Roberts, Matt Cheer, and also Panama Floyd. And thank you very much to all of you for that generosity tonight and bring us up to $5,622 on the fundraiser. I'm almost speechless. I'm almost not able to talk. This is crazy. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank everyone who we were able to shout out. Of course, Herd of Corgis and Hal Rose for being the biggest. I think DCC Prime threw in a 350 earlier, which was also one of the biggest. But Hal Rose, DCC Prime, and Herd of Corgis, y'all are the top three top donors of the night. Amongst the three of y'all, I believe y'all have thrown in about $1,700 just amongst the three of y'all. That is unbelievable and absolutely incredible. I also got to thank all of the other top donors that have supported the fundraiser tonight, and all of the donors who we are not able to call off because there's just so many of y'all. It is a massive thing to us that everyone in the Lee Spring Army continues to do their part and continues to support Ukraine, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to have a reason to make this channel possible. Of course, super chats that support the channel help us to make this channel possible on a day-to-day basis. But if it wasn't for these fundraisers, there wouldn't really be a feeling of purpose to what we do rather than just reporting the news. That is something that I gotta say is absolutely incredible. We're still doing it 760 days on, and that is just insane. It's unbelievable. And I gotta thank y'all all once again for supporting this fundraiser, and once again showing Ukraine that the West still supports them through and through, and the Lee Spring Army will never stop supporting them. And once again, y'all have made sure that our flag is able to fly proudly over every corner of the world tonight, and show everyone that the LSA will continue to support the Western world, and continue to face down the Russians and the Chinese in the future, as that's probably the direction this channel will eventually go into, is covering some Taiwanese news in the future. But we are making sure to stand down the forces of evil around the world here on this channel and actually have an impact on how things unfold. And so with that, thank you all once again. And Matthew, it's time for us to move on into that news that I did not cover tonight about the French, and specifically the kind of concern that they have gotten out of the Crocus City Hall attack. So take it away, Matthew.
All right, and also before we get to that, if y'all were here last night, y'all remember that during that live news updates about the missile attacks, someone said, Matt, your updates are getting on Reddit. They're like posting them on Reddit. Well, one of our super sleuths, which I won't name because I don't want to expose those good skills right there to everyone out there, but one of our super sleuths in the LSA found all those Reddit articles, and people were indeed posting our tweets on Reddit last night. So Matt is actually Reddit famous somewhat. And also someone posted my old drone video as well. So that was kind of crazy. I hardly ever venture into Reddit. I'll have to admit that, because unless I'm like scouring Reddit for some kind of like source for news or something like that, I typically don't have the time to go and like really look through Reddit a ton. But I wish I did have the time, because apparently we're getting shared around quite a bit over there. And also, if you are one of the people sharing us around, thank you very much for that as well, because it looks like that's bringing in a ton of viewers also. But with that, moving on to our poll question here, it says, France raises its terror alert to highest level after the Moscow extremist attack. And what are your thoughts? 69%, nice, said France knows of credible threats. 16% said it's because of the Moscow attack, and 5% said it seems like a publicity stunt. And on this one, I would have to say that France probably knows of some credible threats. I'm sure the Moscow attack did inspire this terror alert level being raised, but that's probably not the whole reason. It's probably because of the credible threats, and we simply don't know about it in the public just yet. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, it sounds like the French are working off of some kind of a serious threat, or at least they're trying to respond to what they think the ebb and flow is going to be. Because if it really was ISIS, they're not going to contain themselves just to Russia. It will spread throughout the rest of Europe. So going off of that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And also, Matthew, while you were talking, I was trying to pull up the Enforcer on Reddit and see if I could get anything. And it looks like there is a lot of talk about enforcing this and enforcing that. I'm not really seeing a lot of our posts, at least in the sort by relevance. I'm just going to put in new and let's see if we get anything there.
That's why I was telling you, the super sleuth in the LSA whose sleuthing skills are beyond my comprehension, because I'm a bit of a amateur sleuth myself. I found all that stuff last night, and it's impressive to me that they found it. And I don't think she'd want me to say her name on the stream, probably because of privacy. But let me go and get the link. I'm going to send it to you so you can look at it.
Also, sadly, I won't be able to look at it during stream. I'll have to look at it after stream because I'll have to open up Discord to see it probably. But beyond that, I'm so happy, Matthew, that I did not open up Reddit and search this on air, because I forgot that Reddit does have the questionable threads, and just typing in a general search of the Enforcer, there are some very interesting threads that are popping up with the word enforce in it. So we are very lucky that we did not show that on air. But beyond that, thank you for sharing that with me, Matthew. I'll make sure to take a look at that after the stream. And by the way, OTubes just said 179,000 subscribers. I just noticed, with a little smiley face. And that she did. That she did. We're actually up to 179,740 subscribers. We've gotten about another 700 today, as of right now. We were actually at 179,000 right before the stream ended last night. So we are just continuing to grow. The Lee Spring Army continues to grow stronger by the day, which is a very true statement, because not before long, probably by tomorrow, in the middle of the day, we're probably going to be at 180,000 subscribers, and we'll have made it to the next 10,000, which is crazy, because we went from 160 to 170 to 180 pretty much in the course of 2 months, which is crazy. But still, with that, I hope that does address that quite well, considering that was brought up in the chat. And Matthew, I think it's time for us to just start talking about general live chat questions.
Yes, it is now time to get to our live chat questions. And also, real quick, a PSA for everyone that ordered an LSA limited edition flag. Like the website said, because I've gotten a couple emails about it, just to say it on stream to verbalize it, we will start shipping around April 22nd, which is coming up here in less than a month. We're waiting for our flags to come in at the moment, and we're going to get to shipping those as soon as they arrive, hopefully sooner than April 22nd. But that is the ship date that we have estimated for the moment. So I did see some folks asking about that. And also the website did go unpublished today, so it's no longer available to see. But we will publish email updates when we start shipping those orders out. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at our store email as well, because we'll be happy to answer your question. And I'll be the one you're interacting with, because I'm the person on the customer service line. So with that, we're moving back into our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. We have Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Rumpelstiltskin, David Millsaps, and Toxic Bananas. They said, Enforcer LSA Signal Corps reports tonight's Morse code dispatch is Russia is in a spiral of chaos and is leading them to a piss. A pass. Long live the LSA. The LSA will never die.
It's leading them to a piss. That's the sound of money. And y'all hit that down on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. Not the piss part, but the pass part. That was the right one. The piss one, not so much. But still, massive respect to y'all for getting that Morse code message correct for the 760th day of the war. I'm very impressed. And I got to say that y'all keep on getting that dead on the nail every single night. It is very impressive. And I got to thank y'all once again for getting that Morse code message correct every single day. But with that, it is time for us to move on into our next question. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and we have a ton of really good questions tonight. And as you all know, it is a fundraiser night, so there are no super chat questions, so they're all live chats tonight. And our first one is going to go to Top G. What color is your Bugatti? He says, what's the situation in Belgrade, and are the boys still bussing?
the boys are still bussing, and what you call it, what you call it, man, you know that's what the Free Russian Army is asking, man. They're getting up to Belgrade, they're going, what you call it, your flag, and then the Russians are like, white. It's about to be white, but they are still in Belgrade. They're not advancing at the moment. We think the Russian army and the Russian border guards may have ended up containing them where they are, but the Free Russian Army is not being pushed out and retreating. So at the moment, that's what we understand the situation to be. They are still bussing, if you want to call it that. It's just that they're not advancing further on to Belgrade any longer. And so with that, I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Neil Vizanot, who says, how many ships do they have left to lose before they stop calling it the Black Sea Fleet?
Well, honestly, it's already down to a flotilla size at this point, in my opinion. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, that kind of answers the question. They've already, kind of fallen off of the fleet register. They're more a flotilla at this point, if anything, because it's just not a fleet-sized force anymore, especially the combat service vessels. They're certainly not fleet-sized. They're more like flotilla or even smaller than that. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to I Am Gift Bearer, who says, that reminds me, what's the current status of grain transport out of Ukraine?
The current status is unimpeded, from what I understand. Grain imports are coming in and out of Ukraine. That's why we haven't heard much about it and much of a complaint, because the Ukrainians so thoroughly destroyed the Russian Navy's ability to enforce their blockade that there really is no blockade at the moment, and the ships are allowed to pass freely. However, from what I understand, they do hug the Ukrainian coastline heading to Odessa, but I hope that gives enough information. The blockade does not exist, and grain flows freely now, I believe, from the ships that are able to pass to Odessa. But then at the same time, there's still not really a big way, like they had in the past, to get all of this grain out. Because it wasn't just Odessa that was supplying these ships with their grains. It was also Mykolaiv as well, which has a pretty substantial port facility here. Those two facilities, side by side, were the ones that were really getting all of this grain out. So now port facilities are pretty much halved, only down to Odessa. So that's why there's still a lot of Ukrainian grains that are trying to make their way into Europe through Romania, Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia. But I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to a Nutty Mouse, who says, what is the date of the earliest the F-16s and pilots will be in Ukraine?
We're hearing midsummer, so I would assume sometime around June or July. So I hope that does address that well, at least the earliest I think they'll be there. But with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one is going to go to Troy Thomason, who says, can the F-16 carry a Storm Shadow missile?
From what I understand, yes. The weapon mounts on NATO aircraft are universal and are able to equip any weapon made throughout the NATO alliance. So hypothetically, an F-16 should be able to carry a Storm Shadow missile and fire it, at least from what I would know. Not every pylon would be able to support the Storm Shadow, though. The ones farthest out on the wingtips would not be able to support the Storm Shadow due to its raw weight, but you could probably put that Storm Shadow onto an inner pylon, and it probably would be able to carry it. Or you could probably maybe if it can fit, equip it to the pylon that's directly under the air intake, and that might work as well. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Brianna Joy, who says, does the Bosphorus have submarine nets, or are submarine nets not used anymore?
The Bosphorus, I believe, does have submarine nets, and also the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, I believe, are so shallow that there's really no way for a submarine to pass. So let me type that in. How deep is the Bosphorus? So the Bosphorus at its deepest is around 361 feet. Which I would assume is probably at the very beginning and end of the Bosphorus. In some areas of the Bosphorus, it is as shallow as 43 feet deep, meaning that at some point, let me see if I can actually get a depth map of the entire Bosphorus. And let's see here. That doesn't really help. How about this? Let's see here. So, from what I'm seeing here, for most of the actual inner part of the Bosphorus, pretty much from the well, not from here, not from the Golden Horn. It looks like it's a little bit further up, right near this bridge right here. From there all the way up to about right here, where this ferry crosses, right here on the map. It is about 20 to 30 meters deep, meaning that a submarine would not be able to successfully dive. And on top of that, with the amount of naval travel, the amount of maritime traffic that passes through the Bosphorus Strait, because it is a very busy waterway. Like if we zoom in here, look at all of these little boats that are skirting around inside the Bosphorus at any given time of the day. If a submarine tried to stay submerged in this area, a boat would probably end up ramming the conning tower and sinking it in the middle of the Bosphorus. So the reality is that they probably would not be able to get the submarine through the Bosphorus, even if there wasn't an anti-submarine net. But from what I understand, there is, because the Turks are very adamant on enforcing their rights of refusal on the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles to really anyone they want to. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion, in what I've been able to find. And with that, we are on to the next one.
In our next one goes to Melissa Renee, who says, do you think the missiles going over Poland will happen again since there wasn't really anything done to Russia about it?
I think it will happen again because it happened to Romania again and again and again. And there's no reason to doubt that the same thing wouldn't happen to Poland unless they started to shoot them down. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I saw TS say that he said, what is the record donation amount for the Sunday live stream? If you're talking about like the total donation raised for a single fundraiser, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of, what was it, like $60,000 or $70,000?
$65,000.
Yeah, that was the actual donation, like fundraiser we had. But as for the single largest donation, I think Mark the Possum, or Mark the Incompetent Drone Operator, might hold that that pass right there. It could be, I think $10,000 was the biggest single donation by him, I think.
Let's see, it was either Narya, or it was Mark the Incompetent Drone Operator, or Mark the Kinetic Possum, because Mark and Narya both put in donations that were around $20,000 to $25,000, which were single donations. And those two folks, I believe, hold like the record for having the largest donations ever put in on a Sunday night fundraiser. That doesn't really happen anymore these days, but it was really impressive when it used to happen in the past, because we would just be chit-chatting and you would see like $25,000 in a single donation get put into the live chat and then put into the fundraiser, which was insane. It was mental. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And it looks like it's kind of a split. People are saying it was Mark or Narya, but either one, because I think both of them ended up getting tied or ended up getting really close to each other. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Warfighters, who says, what do you think about the idea of NATO aircraft taking out missiles approaching Poland, but still in Ukrainian airspace?
I think as long as it looks like those missiles are going straight into Polish airspace, that is completely justified in my opinion. It is a proactive or an assertive measure, an assertive precautionary measure is the best way I'd say that in a political term, to try and justify the shoot downs if they were to happen. But I think they should happen in that instance, especially if they're only like 10 miles away from the Ukrainian-Polish border, which is only, let's see, it's only about that far away from the Ukrainian-Polish border. If they are still going in a straight line trajectory at that point towards the Polish border, they should be shot down. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Robert Marlett, who says, couldn't the F-16s settle the Black Sea Fleet issue in a matter of hours?
Most likely so. Like, in all honesty, not just trying to play up the F-16, they probably could. The thing is, though, is that they're probably going to forbid them from using the F-16s on anything on Russian territory. So if the entire Black Sea does end up moving to Novorossiysk, they'll be untouchable. But if any of them are left in Sevastopol, the F-16s will probably be able to make quick work of them, because some F-16s can be tasked with dealing with air defense, while the other F-16s, after the air defense is completely dismantled around Sevastopol, can start to work on precision strikes on these warships. So overall, I would say, yes, they could easily dismantle not only the air defense around Sevastopol, but the Black Sea Fleet inside of it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Nitch, who says, have you seen the video of the K-9 police officer and dog walking calmly out of the venue of Crocus Hall during the terrorist attack while people run past? And Nige, I did see that video. I saw that one. That wasn't the only fishy thing that happened during that whole terror attack. Also, I don't think we mentioned it on stream, or if we did, I forgot about it. But the Special Forces building is actually right across the way, right across the street from Crocus Hall. But yet it took the Special Forces a whole hour to, quote unquote, drive to Crocus Hall to actually get there and respond to the attack. So, you know, several things, including that video of the K9 officer walking out calmly, sort of rang off alarm bells in my mind as to this might be staged or set up or a false flag. And I'm still leaning on that theory. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm largely still leaning on that theory as well, because it is very bizarre, very fishy for that to have happened. You rarely ever see anything like that. And when you do, it always throws up alarm bells about what are these people really doing, because it doesn't look like it's a legitimate thing. It looks like these people are actually a part of some kind of a plan where they were told, okay, you're there until something happens and then you leave once you hear gunfire. Because what armed security just walks casually out of a building one step against? No one would. I mean, even under a normal situation, even if they were a real coward, they would run. They wouldn't just walk out. And that's something, once again, that is proving to be quite bizarre about that whole ordeal. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Stu Bidasso, who puts in nothing. It's just a live chat question. I was about to go into super chat routine. He says, I think Ukraine damaged ships or any ships moving to the new port. And what are your thoughts?
I would have to say, can you reread that again?
He said, I think Ukraine should hit the damaged ships or any ships moving to the new port. And your thoughts?
I would have to say yes. If they're moving into the new port down in Ochimchiri, yes, I would say so. That'd probably be good, because it would make sure that they stop using this stupid place. I don't even know what this really is. It looks like some kind of a place where they load coal, but it's the most primitive looking port that I've ever seen. And now they're trying to turn it into an actual naval base. And they do have a couple of patrol boats here, and also the sunken vessel that is just sitting there, sank right at its moorings. But beyond that, I don't really think this is going to be a great place. And I hope the Ukrainians can help to make it a not so great place. But I hope that does address that well, in my opinion. And also, I see a lot of people laughing that have responded to someone by just saying, nah, I'm good, about them complaining about that. And I'll explain that maybe you're new to the channel, so maybe you don't know. But the reason why I do that is because Matthew is a very busy person behind the scenes, and he does not know when I am done talking and when I'm ready to move on to the next one unless we give an audio cue. So my audio cue is a pretty long one, so that way he can get the next question ready, because he's probably doing something else right now at the moment, and then he has to switch entirely back over to getting the next question for me. So how I get into that is by saying, I hope that does address that well, and with that, we're on to the next one, because that gives him enough time to go from whatever he's doing right now back to trying to grab a live chat. So, nah, I'm good. I'm going to keep doing that because it's for a reason. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And it is quite helpful, because typically I'm either on Twitter looking for breaking news updates to start covering on the stream, or in between answering viewers' questions, or adding questions to the spreadsheet, and also doing polls and also announcements. So it's quite a bit on my end. And also occasionally I'll throw in some commentary here and there. But with that, we're moving on to our next question, which goes to Duncan VR, the channel legend. He says, are NATO countries really prepared for a full-on missile attack? And I don't think so, but what do you think?
I would say they're probably not ready for a missile attack, because usually the air defense would have to be prepped and primed to be able to stop incoming missiles. So the first missile attacks would take NATO completely off guard, but then they would immediately start to ready their air defense networks and systems, and then by the time the next air attack would come in, they would be ready. But the first one, if it's ever launched by surprise, would take them completely off guard. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to C, who says, do you think Macron will actually send in French troops since they launched an attack on Western Ukraine?
Can you reread that one again?
He says, do you think Macron will actually send in French troops since they launched attack Western Ukraine?
I don't think so, because attacks on Western Ukraine have happened a lot in the past, and it's never been a catalyst for Western intervention, so I don't believe that this will become an exception to the norm. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Maxim. Is on the topic of airspace in Poland. Why scramble airplanes? Question mark. Is that standard protocol, or does modern technology enable sensors/cameras on missiles? That is to spot enemy bases.
The reason why the aircraft are scrambled is because F-16s in all aircraft, fourth generation aircraft and beyond, have a pretty good ability to pick up incoming ballistic and cruise missiles on their radars and to be able to fire off a missile to shoot them down. So the reason why they mobilized the F-16s is that the F-16s were going to be the first line of air defense. If the missiles did cross the Polish border and continued heading towards a major Polish city, the F-16's job would have been to lock the missile on radar and attempt to shoot down an air-to-air missile to try and destroy the missile before it can make it to its target. So that's why the F-16s were mobilized. It's not really about the camera, because there isn't a camera on these missiles. It's more like GPS inputs and waypoint inputs that are put into these missiles. But the reason why they did that was so that way they could shoot them down if they really were going for a Polish target instead of a Ukrainian one. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is gonna go to Girk, who says, do you think the United States should arm Taiwan and or station troops there? And if so, how much of what and how many of what troops?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say yes. The sad thing, though, is that requires a lot of diplomatic footwork beforehand. It's not as easy as us saying, can we set up here? And they go, yeah. We would have to bring Taiwan into some kind of a defensive pact or an alliance, which they currently really aren't in at the moment. There's one that kind of does exist, but it's kind of died. And it's also been superseded by other treaties that have really started to distance us from Taiwan. So we would have to get a brand new diplomatic agreement, some kind of a defensive pact or a defensive alliance with Taiwan. And we would most likely have to include the Japanese and the South Koreans into it, something of a quadrilateral form of a defensive pact in the area. Probably what we would call the East Chinese Sea Defensive Alliance or something along those lines. After we get that defensive alliance in place, we could then request of the Taiwanese permission to build U.S. military bases on Taiwan, or we could request for access to some of their bases so that way we can base U.S. Air Force, U.S. Navy, or U.S. Army and Marines out of some of the bases that they already have. That would probably be the preliminary step. They would most likely give us permission, which would allow a small U.S. presence to be there in Taiwan, and then we would probably request of the Taiwanese government to then start building our own military bases throughout the area. Then after we do that, then that's when we can actually talk about how many forces would we really want and where. I think the best thing that we could do is to try and build some kind of a small Marine garrison on Kinmen County, as Kinmen County is right inside of Xiamen Harbor, which is a very big deal because we believe that Xiamen Harbor and Guangzhou, which are incredibly large cities, very close to Taiwan, would most likely be the places where the Chinese would stage for some kind of an amphibious invasion or where their supply lines would start from. This means that if there's a Marine contingent on Kinmen County, they could constantly have a presence pretty much in the middle of the harbor and be able to watch anything that's going on in the area. Really, we wouldn't need to do that, though, and that could be considered putting some Marines in harm's way, considering that if a war was to break out, they are in the middle of literal hell because there's no way to really get them out of there at that point, or to successfully evacuate them. So we might want to do that with recon instead, but we could always put a Marine garrison on Kinmen County. But in reality, I would say that the kind of presence that we should have in Taiwan would probably only be about a 20,000, 30,000 strong force at any given time. Probably most of that would be U.S. Navy and U.S. Air Force personnel, and also accompanied by the U.S. Marines. I don't really think that the U.S. Army would necessarily require any sort of a presence on the island. The Army would more so be dedicated to operations inside of South Korea and Japan still. And even so, from what I understand, the U.S. Army doesn't really have a lot of bases or even, I guess you could say, not really deployments. I'm trying to think of the other word. Rotations into Japan that exist. So really the Army would be a South Korean thing. The Marines would cover Japan and Taiwan at the same time. And on top of that, the Marine Corps and the new doctrine that they are practicing, which has completely removed armor from their from pretty much their battle order is something that I believe will probably be very beneficial in Taiwan, because a lot of the terrain in Taiwan is not conducive to armored vehicle warfare. The lowlands here are marshes and will never be able to support the weight of a tank for that long. And on top of that, the mountainous regions are of course completely unsuitable for any kind of a main battle tank. It would be very difficult to operate one there. So overall, I think the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the Navy would probably be best suited for bases here, and I would say out of all of them combined, maybe 20 to 30,000 personnel. So with that, I hope that does address it well.
And also, by the way, it was actually admitted to about 2 days ago. It came out and sort of leaked. It wasn't supposed to come out, but there are special forces, U.S. special forces, on the Kinmen Islands already. They've been operating there for a little while secretly, but someone accidentally said the wrong things and leaked it, which was actually one of the Taiwanese guys that leaked it out by accident. But they are operating there already under the guise of training, but really they're stationed there alongside the Taiwanese.
Also, another thing I'd like to add really quickly, talking about a U.S. presence with Taiwan, a big part of the defensive alliance would be massively strengthening Penghu County. I'm not even kidding, that's just the name of the county, is Penghu County. But one thing I think would be very beneficial with Penghu is not to have U.S. forces here, but to provide a special grant to the Taiwanese. It's pretty much going to be like a categorical grant, not in a domestic form to a U.S. state, but to a foreign nation, where we give the Taiwanese enough money and pretty much a blank check to buy whatever they want, whatever they need, to turn Penghu County into a series of island fortresses. Because Penghu County will, if it was fortified properly with air defense and anti-ship defenses, would pretty much be a massive shield to southeastern Taiwan, because the Chinese would never be able to launch a successful naval invasion on this part of the country or any kind of air attacks on this part of the country, because you pretty much have Penghu County protecting the entire area from any incoming attacks, because it's pretty far off the mainland. Let me make sure to measure it from coast to coast. The closest Penghu County is to the mainland is about 30 miles away, which is a very big barrier that would give southeastern Taiwan a lot of protection. So that's what I would say I would do if I was president. If we were trying to get into Taiwan, that's the amount of forces I think would probably be appropriate, distributed amongst all the branches, and also what I would want the Taiwanese to do to at least give them a little bit of a heads up or a preparatory step on dealing with the People's Republic of China. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and I believe we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to Ari Sawini, Kiwi wife and Finn. He said, will ISIS target Russia now, more now that they seem won't take warnings of terrorist attacks seriously?
Maybe. I was about to choke right there. That's why I sounded so stressed when I went, but maybe they would. I can't really say for certain, because the way these supposed terrorists that have been captured today have been treated has been pretty freaking wild. I mean, it's pretty bad. I don't think that's going to dissuade them, though, because that never dissuaded any of the Afghans or the Mujahideen from fighting against the Soviet Union back then. So I think the terrorist attacks will probably continue inside of Russia, even after what happened with this one. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is, and also, sorry for the bot voice, folks. I don't know what's going on with our internet. It's kind of crap right now. But the last one goes to Old Buzzard, who says, will the F-16s be able to intercept the Russian bombers in the east of the Caspian Sea before they fire their cruise out hypersonic missiles?
Sadly, I don't think they'd be able to. I believe one of the longest range missiles in American inventory currently is the AIM-120 AMRAAM, and the AIM-120 AMRAAM has something along the lines of, let me check the range, operational range. Well, the AIM-120D is about 86 nautical miles. So that is 86 nautical miles to miles. And how many miles is that? That would be about 99 miles. So the AIM-120 has a range of about 100 miles. That means that if you want to make sure that your F-16s were not getting shot down by Russian air defense, because it can happen, and it did happen in the Gulf War, that F-16s were shot down by Russian surface-to-air systems, you would be able to fire that missile from maybe around Kryvyi Rih, about 100 miles. And that means that you would only really be able to shoot down air targets that are about towards the direction of Melitopol. So you really wouldn't be able to shoot down the Tu-160s with the F-16s because they still don't have a missile that can be fired and travel that far to be able to hit a Tu-160 or a Tu-95 successfully that would be firing off its missiles in the southeastern side of the Sea of Azov. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Unfortunately, the answer would be no. It would not be able to successfully shoot down those bombers, but we have reached the end of tonight's stream, and it's insane because there's still 5.3 thousand of y'all here right now. That is nuts to me, and I got to thank every single one of y'all for sticking with us for 2.5 hours tonight as we cover the news, fundraise for Revive Soldiers of Ukraine, and hit a whopping $5.8 thousand nearly at this point at the end of the fundraiser. And once again, listen to the breaking news of the day. We are massively appreciative of each and every one of y'all, and I got to thank y'all all for being here with us tonight, talking about some pretty interesting and wild topics, and not only that, helping out that fundraiser. We're always greatly appreciative, and if y'all did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because it will help you to keep notified when this stream runs, which is 6 days a week, every single day of the week but Monday. So that means that we will not be running a stream tomorrow, but you can count on us to run one on Tuesday, which is going to be about 48 hours from now. And we run these streams every single day at the exact same time. So as long as you get this as a part of your routine, you will never miss one of these streams. Also, we put out short war summaries like we did today, which are about 15 to 20 minutes long and cover some of the major topics of the war on that day. Not all of them like we do on the stream, but just the big ones. But with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army! The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. And once again, thank you all very much for a very successful fundraiser. Once again, about $6,000 or so for Charity for Ukraine once more, and a major feat. So it's all because of the LSA. Thank you all very much. And we'll see you all on Tuesday night and also tomorrow as well for the short war summary. But with that, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, and good night.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.